across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Between now and 10, we're going to ask the question about whether Keir Starmer's involvement in these negotiations has anything to do with peace in the Middle East, because he said time and time again, it's not our war. Well, actually, now he's flying to the Middle East tomorrow. Does this mean that in any way he's going to help? What do you think about that? We're also in a situation where we can answer the question, does Starmer have any influence on peace in the Middle East? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. We've got some top guests to go through this. I agree with Kevin, actually. I was chatting to him a second ago, as you may have seen or heard, that I'm not sure the US or indeed Iran get very much out of this. In fact, they may have been humiliated by it too. Within the last few minutes, Caroline Levitt, who is the press secretary at the White House, has confirmed that J.D. Vance, a man who's been very, very quiet in all of this, is heading off to Islamabad, to Pakistan, to try to work it out. Trump is speaking at 8:30 as well, and we will hear from him. Certainly, it'll be interesting to see what he's talking about with Mark Rutte, he's the head of NATO, especially as Caroline Levitt has just said in the last few minutes that NATO turned its back on America. It's not all just about that, of course, as well. We'll be talking about the Labour Council, which found an envelope with a personal trainer's name and address on it. Well, it fined him 600 quid for fly tipping. We'll talk to Mark Francois, MP, the Shadow Defence Minister. We'll also speak to the Animal Welfare campaigner Dominic Dyer about Labour backing down on foie gras and fur bans to ease an EU trade deal. That is an absolutely shameful thing the government is doing, and as you know, animal rights are really important to me, far more important even to Dominic Dyer. He's a great campaigner, and we'll speak to him a little bit later on in the programme. Whatever your view, whatever you think, however you want to express your opinion, let me know. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute. We'll play it out. 0344 499 1000. We will also take WhatsApp text messages. Send them in on the same number, or give me a ring on the same number, which is, of course, 0344 499 1000. Loads to debate, loads to talk about. A really dramatic day for the world and for our country to some degree too. So much to talk about between now and 10. So stay with us here on the Evening Exchange on Talk. Let's just reflect on what Caroline Levitt has been saying. She is the White House press secretary. She's been giving a fairly lengthy press conference in the last hour or so, and she says NATO let us down.
I have a direct quote from the President of the United States on NATO, and I will share it with all of you. They were tested and they failed. And I would add, it's quite sad that NATO turned their backs on the American people over the course of the last 6 weeks, when it's the American people who have been funding their defense. As you know, President Trump will be meeting with Secretary Rutte in a couple of hours here at the White House, and I know he looks forward to having a very frank and candid conversation with him.
Well, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, has been talking about this as well. He says Iran begged for a ceasefire. This was right up to the last minute, about 90 minutes before the 1 a.m. deadline. If you're watching or listening to Petri last night, she will have reported that breaking news. We've been reflecting it on it all day today on Talk. Iran blinked, but perhaps America did too. We'll get into all of that with our guests throughout the programme, but let's see what Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said too.
Iran begged for this ceasefire, and we all know it. As the President truth this morning, a big day for world peace. Iran wants it to happen. They've had enough. Operation Epic Fury was a historic and overwhelming victory on the battlefield. A capital V military victory. Now we have a chance at real peace and a real deal. The War Department, for now, has done.
That is Pete Hegseth speaking there. And Starmer, we're asking the question this evening about what you think he's done and what role you think he should have. Nat has been in touch from Israel already, from Tel Aviv, says, Starmer, help. Don't make me use foul language, Peter. Lock him up until the deal is done. I'm begging you. Well, let's hear from the man himself. He's on his way to the Middle East. This is what he said earlier on today, the Prime Minister.
We've just reached this ceasefire, which is both welcome and I think there'll be a sense of real relief. There certainly is across the region and for the United Kingdom. But there's work to do, and I'm here in Saudi Arabia and neighbouring countries now to carry out that work in support of what we're all seeking, which is that this ceasefire should be not a temporary ceasefire, but a permanent ceasefire. On top of that, we have to acknowledge that this war wasn't our war, but my job is to protect the UK. It's already had an impact on the UK, and it's very important that we get the Strait of Hormuz open. There's a lot of work to do there. We've been convening a number of countries. I now get the opportunity here in Saudi Arabia and countries nearby in the region to have the discussions, to coordinate our actions, and to go forward collectively in pursuit of those two missions.
Sorry, what planet are you on, Keir? Seriously, we've got the ceasefire. It's important that I am here. This is a person who, Lord Kempsell, Ross Kempsell, formerly of this parish, now a Conservative peer, says Starmer has immediately flown to the Middle East to emphasise his crucial role in the US-Iran ceasefire, which he didn't broker, didn't know was coming, didn't participate in shaping, and had absolutely no part in whatsoever. I mean, Ross is absolutely right. What do you think in all of this too? Dawn has been in touch and says, like you, I really hope for a regime change in Iran so that neighbouring countries could live in peace, perhaps even open up Iran for tourism. Starmer going to the Middle East is pathetic, says Simon from Durham. A flaccid attempt to look relevant on the world stage. Embarrassment is an understatement. Well, let's speak to an American political expert, Matthew Bryza, who's a former White House official who's with us now. Matthew, before we get into all of what President Trump has done, what the Iranians think, what the Israelis think, what Netanyahu thinks, has Starmer had anything to do with this whatsoever? He stands there in Saudi Arabia and says, we've got a ceasefire. I mean, that's very much like me saying, you know, the recent successes of Manchester City are all down to me because I read a newspaper once.
Yeah, I was going to say, my favorite baseball team, Chicago Cubs, won the championship. Now, of course, he had nothing to do with shaping this outcome. I mean, the outcome is still being shaped, by the way. Yep. I mean, the Pakistanis, right, are brokering talks, and there are two very differing interpretations of what the basic points of agreement are between Tehran and Washington. I mean, in each capital. So no, of course, he didn't shape anything.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. Let's just hear that clip again. Let's just remind ourselves what
this war wasn't our war.
Prime Minister of the United Kingdom taking credit for something he had nothing to do with. Let's play the clip.
Just reached this ceasefire, which is both welcome and I think there'll be a sense of real relief. There certainly is across the region and for the United Kingdom. But there's work to do, and I'm here in Saudi Arabia and neighbouring countries now to carry out that work in support of what we're all seeking, which is that this ceasefire should be not a temporary ceasefire, but a permanent ceasefire. On top of that, we have to acknowledge that this war wasn't our war, but my job is to protect the UK. It's already had an impact on the UK, and it's very important that we get the Strait of Hormuz open. There's a lot of work to do there. We've been convening a number of countries. I now get the opportunity here in Saudi Arabia and countries nearby in the region to have the discussions, to coordinate our actions, and to go forward collectively in pursuit of those two missions.
Our actions. I now get the chance. I'm having to come out to the Middle East. I mean, you're not saving the day here. You're really not. I mean, he has emphasised over and over and over again, Matthew, this is not our war. That is a direct quote from Keir Starmer. This is not our war. Yet he's going to be the one who's going to come in and save the day, even though this ceasefire has been agreed anyway. Were you surprised that it was agreed? Because we actually had someone on the programme last night who said, look, this is classic Trump. 90 minutes before the deadline, there's going to be something announced. And lo and behold, the Prime Minister of Pakistan started the ball rolling. And then, of course, the ceasefire was announced.
Yeah, Peter, I wasn't surprised at all. In fact, in my circles of whatever we are, debaters or so-called experts, I was saying last night that the proposal by the Pakistanis really must have come from President Trump, because he clearly didn't want to destroy Iran's civilization. He clearly wants to get out of this war. He's stuck in it. And he clearly believes that NATO has not helped at all. Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, is visiting Trump in the White House today. And at the end of the press conference just now, Caroline Leavitt, his press spokesperson, she actually said that something that could be discussed is whether President Trump will take the U.S. out of NATO. Now, that's legally not possible in the U.S. system, but nonetheless, there's no we here from President Trump's perspective. This was all the United States face-to-face or via Pakistan, not face-to-face with Iran. And now the negotiations are going to ensue. And President Trump, though, to answer your question, did what I expected him to do. I'm not going to say he chickened out or backed down. I don't think he wanted to use massive military force on...
He certainly talked a lot about that. He talked about destroying a civilization. But even Caroline Leavitt ruing back on that language today. We were out in the office there just listening to the press conference as it happened. It's interesting you mentioned that point on NATO, because it would take a majority of the Senate for them to actually withdraw from NATO, but some very strong language from Caroline Leavitt on it. He's going to be speaking to Mark Rutte at the moment, and we'll get a press conference from the Oval Office from Donald Trump. We'll take that at 8:30 this evening. If it's on time, whenever it is, we'll dip into it. What do you expect that meeting to occur, especially as Mark Rutte has previously been quite a fan of Trump in some ways? He called him daddy quite weirdly.
Yes, Big Daddy, very strange. Yes, and Secretary General Rutte takes a lot of flack from other NATO leaders for really bending over backwards to placate and please Trump. And, that approach didn't really work so well for Prime Minister Starmer. But President Trump does seem to be quite fond of Rutte, and Rutte is really, it's a tough job to be NATO Secretary General, yes, to hold together this coalition.
Who'd have thought? He didn't think so when he signed up for the job. He thought it'd be a walk in the park, but then it turned out to be a tricky enough gig. Matthew, who are the winners here? Because you could argue that both have won, America and Iran to some degree. Iran's regime is still there. Trump hasn't quite got what he wants, even though he's trying to tell us that he has. Or that, alternatively, that both sides have been humiliated by this. What do you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, Russia has won, right? Because Russia is able to drive a wedge, or allow a wedge to be driven between the United States and many of its European allies, and it's enjoying sales of oil at a much higher price than it was before. I don't think either the U.S. or Iran has won based on these points that are on the table. The Iranian people, they'll win from here on out if there's no more fighting. But Israel's going to continue the war in Lebanon. So I really don't think anybody's won here. Certainly, the Iranian side was defining victory really as survival and as disruption of the global economy, and it appears to have survived, and it appears to have disrupted the global economy. For the United States, sometimes regime change was the goal at the very beginning, then it wasn't.
Oh, it changed dramatically, didn't it? And that has put at least some fissure between the Americans and the Israelis, particularly on regime change, which Trump now rarely talks about and seems to not care about.
Yeah, it's true. And Secretary of War Hegseth tried to say the regime has changed, but there is a change not in the nature of the regime, but in the personnel. And unfortunately, it's a change that's to the disadvantage of the United States, because those negotiators who were seeking some sort of middle ground are dead. And so who's left are the very hardliners of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, several of which were in positions of power during the Iran-Iraq War, which people forget that war lasted, 8 years?
Yeah.
And 1 year in, Iran had recovered all the territory lost by Iraq, but they kept on fighting for another 6 years. Those same personnel are now the main leaders of Iran.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Listen, thank you, Matthew. Much appreciated. Lots of text coming on. That's Matthew Bryce, I should say, former White House official. Clayton in Dartford. I've heard some many names for Starmer. Keith Stalin is one that people call about. Leiber. Lots of different names come in from various people. But Clayton has come up with a new one that I haven't heard before. I try not to think too much of what Liar-Tulla Starmani thinks, says or does in order to preserve what is left of my sanity, says Clayton in Dartford. Carol in North Wales says, Starmer makes me so ashamed for our country. He didn't want to help the USA, particularly Trump, to appease the Muslim vote in this country. For goodness sake, the Yanks are based in this country and have their planes here, but he tied their hands. My father served in World War II, was assigned to the Americans in Cologne in Germany. He married a German girl who worked for the British Army, my mother, but that's another story. The Americans came to Britain's aid and Europe, and yet he turned his back on them. I know my father would be so ashamed, as would any veteran. Now he's pouncing around in the Middle East, trying to make himself relevant and taking credit, snivelling cards, says Carol in North Wales. Pouncing around. Better not do too much pouncing around in Saudi Arabia, let me tell you. Glenn in Catterick says, it's quite clear Keir Starmer is now living in a parody of himself. Dear God, says Glenn. Angela says, you're a tool is a derogatory insult, meaning someone is a foolish, weak-willed or being manipulated by others. Starmer to a T. Mark and Selby, Keir has started his farewell tour, saying as he will just be a dot in our country's rear-view mirror very soon, God willing, says Mark. I think he's perhaps alluding to the pressure Starmer may well be under after the local elections. Ernie says, hi Peter, hi Ernie. Was Starmer saying we, meaning me and the Iranians, have got a ceasefire from Trump because nothing else fits? Really weird. He said it over and over and over again. I'm here to help. I now get the opportunity. Our mission. He said this over and over again. It's nothing to do with you. You are irrelevant. He had said over and over and over again, this is not our war. Yet suddenly the peace is, we should all be grateful to him. Tony in Marchwood says, don't let Starmer do any negotiation. He'll end up giving the Isle of Wight away. Says Tony. Well, he says Starmer is utterly irrelevant. The only person who doesn't know that is him. Margaret in Birmingham says, why has Starmer gone to the Middle East? Oh yes, a chance to be on the world stage. Smile, hugs, photo opportunity. This is just another chance to leave the country. He didn't back our greatest ally, says Margaret in Birmingham. And Pete says, how dare Starmer try to take credit for the ceasefire? The man is so deluded. Good job. He is a total, well, I'll not read out that word. Anyway, lots to discuss. We're going to go to the debate desk in just a second. Lauren McEvat is on the debate desk again this evening. She was with us last week. James Hodgkinson returning as well. They will have plenty to say about this. I know you do too. I can see the phones going. 0344 499 1000. Get your call in. We'll get your calls as soon as we can. We'll ring you back and make sure we get as many voices on the air as we can between now and 10 o'clock. We'll talk about all of this, of course. Also a bit more Kanye West, NASA and Rangers Workers' Rights Police too. And we'll answer the question, does Starmer have any influence on peace in the Middle East? Stay with us here on Talk.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has been in touch. We will get to more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes in a second, but we're going to the debate desk now, and I'm delighted to be joined again by Lauren McAvitt, the former Conservative Special Advisor. Hello.
Hello. And
James Hodgkinson, Research Associate at the Adam Smith Institute. How are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm very well, but I'm shocked by both of these people who've apparently never seen EastEnders, so there we are.
I'm shocked by you as an Irishman, unable to pronounce my last name.
McAvitt.
McAvitt.
I know, that's
no Mac.
Did I not say that?
No.
Well, there we are. Usually it's Claire Muldoon who tells me off, but now it's Lauren McAvitt. There we are. Thank you to Penny in Essex, who says, "Good evening, Peter. Starmer is hoping he can glean a bit of credit for the so-called ceasefire. He's an utter disgrace." And Steve says, "Names for Starmer. I call him Judith Starmers, as he's always in another country and never here." Do you know who Judith Chalmers is?
No.
Do you know who Judith Chalmers is?
Unfortunately not.
Goodness sake. This is... What do you do? Any pop... Have you heard of Cheryl Cole? I mean, are there any pop... Robbie Williams?
I've heard of her. She was the one with... Isn't she the one with the dodgy accent who got in trouble over her date of birth on Pop Stars Island?
No, that's Nadine Coyle.
Oh, it's close.
For goodness sake. Oh, same band anyway. Nadine.
See, I felt like I was zeroing in on it there.
Can we get back to the potential of World War III, please? Let's hear what Caroline Levitt has been saying on NATO and her view about that.
I have a direct quote from the President of the United States on NATO, and I will share it with all of you. They were tested and they failed. And I would add, it's quite sad that NATO turned their backs on the American people over the course of the last 6 weeks, when it's the American people who have been funding their defense. As you know, President Trump will be meeting with Secretary Rutte in a couple of hours here at the White House, and I know he looks forward to having a very frank and candid conversation with him.
So Mark Rutte will be with Starmer, not with Starmer, because he's off, obviously, sorting out the ceasefire. We'll get to him in a minute. But with Trump in the White House, and we're going to hear from them in about half an hour. We'll bring you that live on the programme. But I just want you to listen, and I want James and Lauren to listen really carefully to the number of times in this next clip that Starmer, speaking in Saudi Arabia, says, "I'm here too. We get to do, I now get the opportunity, our ceasefire." Yeah. Just listen to this.
Well, we've just reached this ceasefire, which is both welcome, and I think there'll be a sense of real relief. There certainly is across the region and for the United Kingdom. But there's work to do, and I'm here in Saudi Arabia and neighbouring countries now to carry out that work in support of what we're all seeking, which is that this ceasefire should be not a temporary ceasefire, but a permanent ceasefire. On top of that, we have to acknowledge that this war wasn't our war, but my job is to protect the UK. It's already had an impact on the UK, and it's very important that we get the Strait of Hormuz open. There's a lot of work to do there. We've been convening a number of countries. I now get the opportunity here in Saudi Arabia and countries nearby in the region to have the discussions, to coordinate our actions, and to go forward collectively in pursuit of those two missions.
He said again, in fairness to him, he said this is not our war, but he seems to be claiming that it's maybe his ceasefire. Lauren?
I make that 8, references it to being us, we and them, which I think is bold. Bold. I did just see a great
I read it out.
meme of the Prime Minister making tea. Which I presume is what he's over there to do as his major contribution to proceedings. Talking about people who are from Europe wading in to comment on this, though, I did also really enjoy, for the first time ever, a contribution from the Spanish Prime Minister, who said he was not going to applaud the people who set the world on fire and then showed up with a bucket.
It's a very good point. I often say, when it comes to the Belfast Agreement and Martin McGuinness, if someone's hitting you over the head with a hammer, you don't say thanks for stopping. The one I actually read out earlier was Ross Kempsell, who we both know, Lord Kempsell, formerly of this parish, actually, former political editor of this station. He said he's now a Conservative member of the House of Lords. Starmer has immediately flown to the Middle East to emphasise his crucial role in the US-Iran ceasefire, which he didn't broker, didn't know was coming, didn't participate in shaping, and had absolutely no part in whatsoever. James?
Well, Starmer said that there's work to do. The fact is, most of the work now in brokering the ceasefire has already been done. He didn't play a part in that. And what this war has shown us, I'm afraid, is quite how weak we are internationally. I use the example of HMS Dragon, which took 2 weeks to get to Cyprus, and now we're told it's broken down. We need...
It's a perfect metaphor, really, for... But then again, is your view that we should have got militarily involved, that we should have answered America's call?
My view is this. The action that Keir Starmer took appeased no one and helped no one. He didn't get involved, so he was always going to hack the US off. The fact that he didn't even immediately willingly offer bases was a misstep. But now he has also got these people at home that say nothing, that too much is being done. So he's not winning on any ground, and really the indecision is what's cost him here.
Why is he even there, Lauren? What does he hope to contribute? We know from Caroline Levitt that JD Vance, who's leading the longer-term negotiation on this, obviously this is a 2-week ceasefire, he's leading the longer-term negotiation in Islamabad, in Pakistan, where...
Vance, famously, by the way, the only one who did not support the idea of Trump going into Iran, which is quite an interesting choice.
Well, exactly. He's
on
clearly
the
trying to bring him up.
part.
But what is the point of Starmer, A, being in Saudi Arabia and not Pakistan, and B, these negotiations haven't even started yet? They're not starting till Friday.
Well, I mean, maybe he fancied a bit of sunshine. Maybe he didn't feel like we were getting enough sunshine. It's a glorious day in London today. Perhaps he felt like the people screaming Allahu Akbar at the gates of Downing Street were something that he wanted to get away from. And he was going to get a friendlier welcome from Saudi Arabia than he was from the streets of Whitehall. Perhaps that was it. But other than making the tea, I can't really see what he's doing out there. Now, the Ukrainian president showing up in the Gulf last week, now that genuinely was interesting.
Why?
Because the GCC are going to finance...
Tell us who the GCC are.
The Gulf states are going to finance Ukraine, and they are going to invest massively in anti-drone technology in ways that we have been so slow to support with through our own procurement mechanisms in the West. Because, as Ukraine has said multiple times, Iran is and always has been the long arm of Russia when it comes to how they are fighting on their front lines. It is Iran supplying the Shahed drones. It is Iran who downed that plane. Iran has always been a feature of the war in Ukraine, and it's only now that everybody's waking up to how bad Iran really is.
I'm slightly surprised by this message from Neil in Rhondda Valley, who says, I believe one of the main reasons our Prime Minister stayed out of this Iranian conflict is because it would show support... Oh, right, now I understand. It's because it would show support to Israel. We know how little he is willing to support Israel in matters at home, so he definitely won't support them in a conflict. He's also worried he'd have his Islamic friends voting him out should he dare to help Israel, says Neil in Rhondda Valley. Now I understand, Neil.
What's hilarious is I don't think he's actually stopped the bleeding on the left. I think he's still... all the polls indicate that he's bleeding votes to Plaid Cymru and the Greens in Wales. He's bleeding votes to the Greens and Independents in England. He's bleeding votes to the SNP and the Greens in Scotland. He's not stemming the tide anywhere where he needs to by having shallied about in the middle, to be honest. James,
I think your microphone might be a little bit scratching on your internal, on your just underneath. If you just put it on your tie or something like that, might be a better thing, just to help people's ears. But in terms of Israel, it's interesting, this is not a total ceasefire. Obviously, the attacks on Hezbollah and Hezbollah's attacks on Israel are continuing. What do you make of that element of things and what Netanyahu's saying?
Well, I think what we've got in the Middle East is still a really unstable situation. The ceasefire between America and Iran is, in my view, a positive first step. It needed to happen if we're going to try and bring peace back to the Middle East. But we have also got these other conflicts going on. There are other actors who need to make their reconciliation with one another. And until that happens, we're still going to see uncertainty in the markets. We're still going to see, more broadly...
Although the price of oil is down.
The price of oil is down by 15%, gas by 20%, but we are still dramatically above where we were before this all kicked off.
And we are still incredibly vulnerable. If you look at the channels that are available to us if the Strait does not open, which is to use, for example, the Suez Canal for things that are routing through the Gulf of Aden, we still have enormous insecurity within Yemen. We still have the Houthis as a proxy for Iran. They have not been fully dealt with yet. They are still a problem. They are significantly better armed than people realise and could still present a problem to us in the Gulf of Aden. And that impacts all of our shipping that comes through Suez.
Lots more on this coming. Phil in Portsmouth says, does Yvette Cooper ever do anything these days? She seems to have disappeared. I think there's a very, very good question to be asked about Yvette Cooper. What did she actually do at the Home Office when she was Home Secretary? What did she actually do? Because I'm not sure there's an answer to that question. Anyway, Yvette Cooper, does she do anything these days? She seems to have disappeared. And as the Foreign Secretary, she should have gone instead of Starmer, who should have stayed at home to sort out this country's problems. Carl in Richmond says Starmovich is going to negotiate a bad peace deal that will cost the UK more money and accept more migrants to arrive. The UK will be an annex of Iran. What is he doing trying to glory hunt? Alex in Cardiff says, if Greta Thunberg invited Keir Starmer to a barbecue in Jamaica, he would go. She'd presumably want to become on a raft or something. Let's hear a voice note from Bridget on Starmer.
Just cannot believe that Starmer has gone out to the Gulf, Peter. Oh my God. I live in France. Our French friends here, they laugh about Starmer to us. We can't argue with them. I mean, he's an embarrassment. It's just like the Gaza thing when Trump sorted it out. He went out there pretending that, you know, he was the be-all and the end-all and he was Mr. Important. He's doing the same thing now. He has nothing to do with that ceasefire. He is so embarrassing.
Thank you for that. And a bit of a new line in that the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says that the US must choose between a ceasefire in Lebanon or the resumption of war. We'll talk about that with James and Lauren in just a second. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has sent me a tweet, including Philip, who says we can't even deploy a fully operational warship to defend Cyprus against Iranian attacks. Yet Starmer is flying off to the Middle East, not being invited, acting as if he's involved in the negotiations. Then he takes credit despite sitting on the fence. There's very little I can disagree with on that. Bob says, who invited Starmer? Is Macron saying the same? Who is chairing this peacekeeping force? Angela says, great show already. As for Keir Starmer using the I word is classic, ego gone wild syndrome. He also keeps saying it's not our war after allowing a protest outside Number 10 with supporters of the Iranian regime. Why are they in our country? Surely they should all be arrested. Well, the IRGC isn't banned. Kanye West is banned, but the IRGC isn't. I mean, I'm very happy that Kanye West is banned, but maybe we should deal with the sort of slightly, arguably bigger issues of, those Iranian spies who want to kill us, for example. Robbie says, call me old-fashioned, Robbie says, I wish Starmer had the same passion to close the English Channel as he does to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He is so desperate to look important. It's embarrassing. Les says the Israelis will not let the IRGC off the hook. This is their chance to end the terror regime for good. And Dallas says, hi Peter, you've just taken the words right out of my mouth. We've just reached this ceasefire. Was that the royal we, Starmer? And just the news that's come through in the last few minutes that the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says the US must choose between a ceasefire in Lebanon or the resumption of war. Lots happening there. We'll get to that actually in just a second. There's a bit of breaking news on a totally different front actually from California. And this is Jasmine Sanga, who was known as the Queen of Ketamine, has been jailed for 15 years for selling Friends star Matthew Perry, he played Chandler in Friends, the ketamine that killed him in October 2023. He was a supremely talented comic actor, incredible timing, brilliant actor who suffered with drug addiction for a very, very long time. And the Queen of Ketamine, as she was known, Jasmine Sangha, has been jailed for 15 years for selling him the ketamine that killed him in October 2023. A really, really tragic case. And the last time he was on screen, actually, there was a big reunion of Friends, a globally popular, incredibly popular comedy programme, which has had a bit of a revival, actually. Gen Z seems to like it too, even though it was started, many of them were broadcast for the first time, 20 years ago. So in that reunion programme, Matthew Perry was clearly having many, many problems, and then he died of an overdose a few months afterwards, actually. So that is the breaking news, that the person who supplied him the ketamine has been jailed for 15 years. Right then, to get back to the Iranian issue, the foreign minister saying the US must choose between a ceasefire in Lebanon or the resumption of war. Are you surprised by that? We're on the debate desk with Lauren McEvan and James Hodgkinson. Are you surprised by that, Lauren?
No, I'm not surprised. Iran are going to start demanding that the United States get their proxy under control, because the Iranian proxy, which is Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, are currently taking an absolute pasting. And this is all about various proxies being hit. But what I think is going to be very interesting to see is whether or not Iran are willing to really go to the mattresses over southern Lebanon, because they stand to make so much money out of tolling the strait, which is what the proposal is. Now, this marks the first time that we have departed from the settled international agreement that we do not toll areas like this. And the precedent that it sets is that Denmark can start tolling up near Jutland, the Spanish can start tolling down near Gibraltar. There's an international, commonly understood agreement that we do not toll these areas, and this breaks that. And Iran and Oman stand to make a lot of money out of it. And are they willing ultimately to go to the mattresses over southern Lebanon and kiss that money goodbye? Probably not.
As was the Ayatollah. James, what do you think?
Well, I think at the end of the day, Iran are very and have been very, very close to calling America's bluff for a long time over the war. I think what we're seeing now is an Iranian regime that, due to the actions that Trump has taken and his administration have taken, are feeling, funnily enough, despite the fact they were being pounded by missiles, they're feeling increasingly emboldened now. And so goodness knows where it goes from here. There are so many possibilities open to both countries, especially if this finance from the tolling happens.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's...
Okay. We will talk a lot more about this with Edmund Fitton-Brown, the former ambassador to Yemen, my favourite analyst on the Middle East. He is absolutely superb. He's also on the right side of history when it comes to Israel, and he is going to give us his analysis a little bit later on in the programme. We're going to talk about other issues, other news stories with Lauren and James in just a second. Let me just read out a few of the messages you've sent in. Anagram of Keir Starmer, Mr. Streakier, says Graham. Not quite sure what that adds to the sum of human knowledge, but thank you anyway, nonetheless. Leslie and Hartley says, I couldn't believe Starmer's words earlier. How could he possibly claim he helped to bring about a ceasefire? He gets more deluded by the day. Ian says, congratulations to Keir Starmer with his success on the Artemis Moon mission. He had a key role there too. Lots of work still to do there too, says Ian. Dawn in Chelmsford said, where is Yvette Cooper, the woman whose head wobbles when she talks? Perhaps she's having a new spring fitted. Okay. Steve says Ms. Cooper is as useless as every Home Secretary has been in the last 30 years. The only thing they have been good at is destroying this country. Mind you could say the same thing about anyone who's worked in Whitehall during that time. Not sure I would say that about everybody who's worked in Whitehall. Although, Lauren, actually, maybe this is one for you. Zen Yogi Zen, Jeffrey. Yeah, that's the Twitter name of...
Right, okay.
Zen Yogi Zen. Jeffrey says, do we have to keep having former spads on this show? I think spads are part of the problem in politics nowadays, and the ones you have on are failed spads. That's why they're in the studio and not in Whitehall.
I don't think I wasn't a failed spad. I just moved on.
I mean, the problem is it would be quite tricky to be a spad now, given that you're a Conservative.
Yes, I feel like there'd be some objections to my personal belief system.
Yeah,
they may struggle.
If only someone would write a book about what spads are and why they're useful people. Only someone would do that. Margaret is in Birmingham and says, the word I keep hearing is irrelevant. This is Starmer. Someone deemed unimportant, insignificant, are they considered to be of no value? That focuses exactly in the DNA of our Prime Minister. Any more suggestions? Answers on the postcard, says Margaret. Great show. Thank you. You're really, really not a big fan of Starmer this evening. I know you're not a big fan any evening, the viewers and listeners, but particularly this evening. Aubrey in Upminster says, says, Keir Starmer really is the John Terry of international diplomacy. Do either of you know what that means? I know John Terry was a footballer and a controversial one.
Didn't he have an affair with a teammate's wife?
I don't know. I think that was Ryan Giggs. Let's not...
I don't know, it's the wrong form of sports ball.
Let's not libel people. I think he turns up in Phil Kit and then doesn't play the game because he was suspended, I'm told by my football-loving producer, Chris.
No, it's the wrong sports ball for me, I'm afraid. I'm a rugby fan.
Okay. Enough sporting and indeed pop culture references. Mary is in Hemel Hempstead and has given me a ring at 0344 499 1000. Mary, you're very welcome to the programme. You're on with me and also Lauren and James. What would you like to say this evening?
Well, I just wonder if Starmer is such an irrelevance in everything now. He doesn't decide anything anywhere and just keeps running. You know, he only works 9 to 5 in the week and takes the weekends off. That's why he's always away, because he doesn't work weekends. What Prime Minister's... He seems to be puffed up with his own importance.
Well, it's a funny thing, Mary, because I think you're onto something there. I must say I do want politicians who are in some way rested. I want them to have a proper night's sleep. I want them to be clear in what they're saying. You know, Rishi Sunak was an absolute workaholic. I'm not sure that necessarily meant for the best decision making. The problem, Mary, I think, is that Starmer seems to make decisions on big things which appear to matter, like Kanye West, which we'll talk about after the break. But the really big, crunchy, difficult stuff, and fair dues to him for Kanye West's decision. It was the right decision. But when it comes to really big, important stuff, like, for example, prescribing the Iranians the IRGC, he doesn't do that. He doesn't take the big decisions when he could, Mary.
Yeah, I know. But what I don't understand with this man is he must read newspapers, he must see the television, he must get reports of how people... I mean, when you see him go over to, say, one of the European countries or one of these summits that he's always going to, he just looks insignificant. They almost ignore him.
Do you want him to be significant, though, or would you rather we stay out of this, Mary?
Well, my personal view is that in the beginning of all of this, the West should have all stood together with the Americans. This would have probably been over then in a week if they had the Arab states were all prepared to stand with the Americans, and the European Union and Starmer and all of those. They were so weak, so frightened because of the Muslim vote. They're all at it.
Mary,
they should have always showed a united front against Iran.
Okay.
Iran is a terrorist thing for all of us, the rest of the world.
Well, you're absolutely right. There's definitely a big danger from them to us. We've seen those many attacks on UK soil. Mary, thanks for your call. Really appreciate that. James, what do you make of what Mary said there?
Well, I think it touches a nerve, and the nerve is that a British Prime Minister should be someone who can walk into a room and command the respect of the people there. That's important, not only for what we are as a nation now, but for what we were in history. And whether or not you want the United Kingdom to be more or less involved in the Iran war specifically, it would be really good if we had a Prime Minister who could stand there and call the shots on the international stage. And sadly, I don't think we've got that.
Lauren?
I mean, regardless of the fact that he's got the personality of an amoeba, I think it's really important to point out at this point.
Very harsh on amoebas.
It really is. Poor little things. It's important to point out that the IRGC was also not prescribed under the last 5 Conservative Prime Ministers and should have been.
Yeah.
It's also really important to point out that the Labour Party have only been in power for 2 years and our naval defences have been underinvested in and under-supported for the previous 5 Conservative Prime Ministers.
And beyond that,
you can't build a warship in 2 years and turn around.
It's really interesting you mentioned that point. Actually, I spoke to someone who advised Gordon Brown, who said Gordon Brown, as Chancellor and Prime Minister, was very good at saying, right, you need this stuff to fight the Afghanistan war or the Iraq war. That is absolutely necessary. The problem came when they said we need a maintenance budget for all the other stuff, and that's where the money was taken away from. Lots more to discuss with Lauren and James, including a bit more on Kanye West as well. So many people getting in touch. Andrew says maybe Keir Starmer's after the Nobel Peace Prize. If he wins that, I think we can all go home. But then again, Yasser Arafat won it, so there we are. And Barack Obama for reasons no one knows. Alex in Cardiff says it makes me sad. It feels too close to Vietnam because no Ayatollah doesn't want the destruction of Israel, says Alex. Very, very good point. Lots more to discuss. Get your comments in. The main number is 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royal tea from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the Royal Tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to the texter who says, surely our glorious supreme leader, when he denied the US access to UK bases, was totally ignored by Iran, showing how significant he is really. Graham in Sterling says, here are a few names for Keir Starmer in Graham's opinion. Keir Jong-un, Vladimir Starmer, Keir Stalin-Namur, Ayatollah Khamenei. However, some might disagree, saying he's not like a dictator, he's just extremely disappointed in dissent. Or how about his indecision is final? Leslie says, Starmer, I'm not going to read that out. Mark says, what is this wee Starmer? Penny says, listening to Starmer, I've just had to reach for the sick bucket. He's a total embarrassment. I bet Trump loves him not, says Penny. And Elisa in Chelmsford says, hello Peter, it's really hard to keep seeing Keir Starmer's face on our screens and to keep hearing his robotic voice saying I this, I that, we this, we that. Ever since he declared he preferred Davos to Westminster, he nailed his colours to the mast. He wants to be God's gift on the world stage, but instead he's a complete embarrassment and he deserves every bit of ridicule he's received on your show. Is there anybody out there who will defend Keir Starmer? Is there anyone out there who says it's a good thing he's in Saudi Arabia? Is there anyone out there who thinks maybe it's good that someone who wasn't involved with the war is there to make the peace? Whatever you think, maybe that person's out there. If you want to get in touch this evening, by all means do so. 0344 499 1000. But we're going to move on and talk about a couple.
It's a shame. I was going to defend Keir Starmer.
Go.
I think he'd be a rubbish dictator.
Okay.
Very clearly he couldn't be one.
We're with Lauren McAfee, former Conservative Special Advisor, and James Hodgkinson, who's a Research Associate at the Adam Smith Institute. The next 10 minutes is going to be a Starmer-free zone. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other aspects that have gone on today, including Rangers workers' rights police to get power to force their way into offices. James, what do you think about this?
Well, businesses, I think, will rightly feel under siege. The Employment Rights Act was a raft of provisions. We saw industrial action legal mandate thresholds drop, we saw the notice period reduce, and we saw unions get any time access to workplaces. And this stuff may sound attractive to those on the left, but what they don't realise is it comes at a cost. The ASI did research on this and we found that it would cost around £1 billion a year. £680 million of that will come out of the pockets of small and medium-sized enterprises. And they've already been hit by an absolutely perfect storm of increases in national insurance, business rates going up, minimum wage going up. And I would say this, these policies are fundamentally anti-growth, and trade unions exist to promote the interests of workers. And that's all well and good, except for the fact that these policies will mean that there are fundamentally fewer jobs in the economy for them to protect.
Lauren?
I think there's some interesting things about this Fair Work agency that they've created, which on the face of it sound like great things, right? This is an agency that's going to be able to raid a business and deal with modern-day slavery. If you look at that, there's no way of arguing and saying that that's a bad thing. The problem is, look at all enforcement, look at all policing in the United Kingdom. Do we think they're going for the high fruit of the complex human trafficking issues, or do we think they're going to stick to the low-hanging fruit compliance issues, which will mostly be errors of accident by small and medium-sized enterprises, all of whom will just have yet another thing that makes it more difficult to do business in this country?
Do you not think the Employment Rights Act has any benefits for workers or businesses? I mean, do you not think that this piece of legislation is a big, complex piece of legislation?
It's a massive piece of legislation.
Is there nothing in it that you think is good?
So I think combining the enforcement agencies is not necessarily a bad idea. Giving them, 12 million more per budget than the combined agencies had previously is probably unnecessary. But they say that there's enough in the Employment Act to make it worthwhile. I think that there's a lot in there that needs to be done better. This wasn't necessarily my way of doing it. There's an awful lot of commonality on the left and the right of the need to protect workers. It's the mechanism that we tend to disagree on, and this is very heavy-handed state intervention rather than saying that the market will largely sort out bad players. And that's because in many instances the general public are sick of the market not sorting out bad players.
And we've gone back and forward on this a number of times.
Because what they're thinking of is like the water industry, which isn't actually a free market.
But James, we've gone back and forward on this on a number of occasions, including with regulation on banking, for example. Do you think, I mean, clearly Labour's view on this and Angela Rayner's view on this is going to be that regulation is a good thing. You, from your ideological perspective, don't think so. But let me ask the question again, is there nothing in the Employment Rights Bill that you think will help our country?
What I see when I look at the Employment Rights Act is a piece of legislation which will have one effect, which is to suppress employment. It will make it harder for businesses to do business. And for me, I feel, as a young person, we should be supporting people into work, not introducing more obstacles that make it far harder for businesses to hire new people.
Let's talk about a little bit about the Wireless Festival cancelling Kanye West. This was yesterday, but of course the backlash continues today. The original booking sparked a huge backlash. What do you make of this, James?
Well, the Adam Smith Institute has recently published a draft free speech bill, and our position as an institute is quite clear on this, which is that free speech in our country is under threat. But I would like to say that, before I go on, what Kanye West has said is utterly disgusting. But what I would say is that what we have in this country now is a situation where laws do seem to apply differently depending on where you are on the political spectrum. We have in this country a very, very hard legal threshold, and that is Section 4 of the Public Order Act, which says unless someone is directly inciting violence, then arguably there is no criminal offence being committed there. So would I go? Would I buy a ticket? Absolutely not. But do I think it's right for the state to take this action? I'm not so sure.
In terms of that, it's really interesting you mentioned that, because I don't think we've really heard that voice actually on certainly my programmes in the last few days. I really believe in free speech. There's a difference though between people who are natives of this country having free speech and someone who wants to come into this country to spread hate. Surely that's a different, that is a varying aspect within this, is it not, James?
The important thing to consider is the fact that, and again, I'm not supporting Kanye West because I agree that what he said is utterly disgusting.
Sure, and I don't think anybody's suggesting that, yeah.
But he has done concerts since he's apologised. He did one in California relatively recently when no hate was spread. So I think we've got a situation where unless there is credible intelligence...
No, come on. He said on a number of occasions that he wasn't sorry. He rescinded his apology. He is clearly someone who is a neo-Nazi, and there is at least a risk that may not have happened in California, but there is at least a risk that he would spread his hate in the UK. And if you have, as Home Secretary or Prime Minister or whoever, have the ability to say, well, this is someone who has to have a stamp to say they're allowed in this country, the answer is no, is it not?
There is indeed a risk, but I'd argue that the real question lies with the organisers of the Wireless Festival. Because at the end of the day, if I was organising that festival, anyone with a degree of foresight would have seen that there would be an
it was really interesting that the organiser said yesterday that at no point were any objections raised. It was clearly trying to shift the blame. Lauren, your thoughts on this?
I think that it's fantastic that the government has finally come around to the idea of banning hate preachers in this country, and I've been in favour of doing this for a really long time. The problem is nobody has actually successfully started doing this basically until today.
Yes.
And there are so many people who come in and speak in this country who probably shouldn't be here, and I think that people will vote for a government that says, no, I am going to control who gets to come here and spread really malicious and horrible, horrible viewpoints in public. Or
alternatively, just I'm going to control who gets to come here.
Yeah, that too. This is fantastic. It's the the first indication that they can control our borders that I've ever seen. I think that the Wireless Festival are under enormous pressure from all the NIMBYs in Finsbury Park who are trying to get it shut down. I think they thought they would sell loads of tickets because Kanye is controversial and it would be a really big draw for people to come and watch him. But I also think if you've got a festival that is based so heavily around one person that you have to cancel it when that one person can't be here, then that's not a festival that's actually a particularly diverse lineup in any way.
Within that though, you've got a situation where they weren't going to cancel it. In fact, the organisers said we're going to go ahead with it and we want this to happen, even though 4 major sponsors had pulled out. Then Kanye West is told he can't come, and then they cancel it. I wonder if just somewhere in their head, hypothetically of course, they were thinking, if Kanye West, our headline act over 3 nights, cancels, we can get our money back from the insurers.
Possibly. I mean, are the sponsors not going to come back then if Kanye is not performing? Are they? Is he not the reason that they pulled out?
Well, yes, but presumably you would say the Wireless Festival is too damaged, at least this year, anyway, for someone like
this. Is ultimately a victory for the Finsbury Park NIMBYs, and I'm delighted for them.
I think it's a victory for common sense, but the wider issue really is why, and you alluded to it earlier on, the IRGC and the big decisions. This is an important decision. I'm glad the government made it. Well done, Keir Starmer.
It's because Shabana Mahmood's my favourite Home Secretary in the last 30 years. She's certainly more right-wing than any of the ones we had.
It's a very interesting point. Very interesting point indeed.
Hugely pro.
Thank you to both Lauren McEvat and James Hodgkinson. Lauren is a former Conservative Special Advisor. James is a Research Associate at the Adam Smith Institute. Let's hear a voice note from Rob on Starmer.
Regarding Keir Starmer, he is just an irrelevance. He's just a little coward who thinks the only way he's going to get attention, really, positive attention, is if he goes to other countries. And there he gets all the fanfare and all the good greetings, and he's made to feel important. In this country, he doesn't feel important at all. And that's why he's always travelling off somewhere. He's pathetic. He's a narcissist. It's most probably feeding his narcissistic feed because he gets positive feedback when he goes to, places like in the Middle East and that. Well, he gets none of that here because we all despise him and hate him.
Rob, thank you. Not everybody hates him, and actually his view on certainly on the Middle East is something, and the war is quite a popular policy. He's not personally popular, but not intervening with something that was popular. Although there are some really interesting and funny memes that are going around, various things going around social media. Let me just show you one of them in just a second. There was one, of course. This is a man who is. I'll just describe it for people listening on the radio. Pretending in a high-vis jacket to help open a subway train door, and then pretending to close them. Obviously, it's all been happening automatically, and the train itself goes off. He looks as if he's pushing the subway train off. He's obviously doing nothing of the sort. He's just play acting, and quite a number of people saying this is sort of Starmer's role in the Middle East. So lots more to discuss, and our question this evening that we're talking about as well was the point of Keir Starmer and in terms of the Middle East. Mike simply says you should have stopped at what is the point of Keir Starmer. That's Mike in Colchester. Lots more to discuss. We'll talk about the issue more generally. Edmund Fitton-Brown will be with us in a second. He's a former ambassador to Yemen. He's my favourite Middle East analyst. We'll talk to him. We'll also talk as well about what's happening at Downing Street. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much for your company this evening. A load of people getting in touch, and we will get to more calls, I promise. We've got some really, really good guests, though, as well. There are lots of people who want to get in on the phones, and we will give you a ring back. If you want to get on the air, 0344 499 1000, and we will come to that soon. However, Edmund Fitton Brown is the former ambassador to Yemen. He is my favourite analyst of the Middle East. There's nothing he doesn't know about what's going on, and he is going to tell us and decode this all for us and work it all out in just a minute or two. We'll hear as well what Caroline Levitt, who is the press secretary to the president, has been saying. We'll hear from the president in about half an hour as well. He's with Mark Rutte, who is the head of NATO. They are chatting in the White House at the moment. They're having a press conference in the Oval Office in around about half an hour. We'll bring that to you, or at least some of it to you anyway. We'll also see what Starmer's been up to and whether there's actually any point of Starmer being in Saudi Arabia at the moment and going round and pretending to be the great peacemaker. Lots to discuss. I want to discuss it with you as well. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk Iran. We'll talk this big ceasefire, the fact that it came to 90 minutes before the deadline, before the ceasefire was announced. We'll also talk about what's happening at Downing Street, because there's a lot of pro-Iran protesters gathering outside Downing Street, shouting Allahu Akbar, God is great. We'll talk to Rakib Hassan about that a little bit later on. Also, a couple of other stories around today. A personal trainer who found he had an envelope with his name and address on it. It was found near some rubbish that had been dumped. He got fined 600 quid for fly tipping. That's quite a lot of lifting of weights. Mark Francois will join us as well, the Shadow Defence Minister, and we will talk to Dominic Dyer, the animal welfare campaigner, about Labour backing down on foie gras and fur bans to ease the EU trade deal. Absolutely shameful. Loads more to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Get your call in. We will get you on the air very, very soon. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on the main number. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message on the main number. You can ring me on the main number. The main number is, of course, 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss. Stay with us here on the Evening Exchange, here on Talk. There's an Israeli angle to all of this as well, especially with Hezbollah in Lebanon. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has been speaking. This is what he's been saying.
And I'd like to stress, we still have some goals to accomplish, and we will achieve these goals either through agreement and consensus or through renewal of the war, because we are ready to do so whenever necessary. Our finger is on the trigger. As you all know, a temporary ceasefire came into effect tonight, a two-week one between Iran and the U.S. in coordination with Israel. No, they did not surprise us at the last moment, and I would like to emphasize this is not the end of the campaign. It is merely a preparation on our way to achieve all of our goals.
Really, really interesting words there from Netanyahu. He also said within that announcement that we are forging new allies in the Middle East. I'm going to get into that with Edmund Fitton Brown in a second, but I want to just remind ourselves what Caroline Levitt has been saying really within the last kind of 90 minutes or so. She was doing a press conference almost up to the moment we were on air with the Evening Exchange this evening. We were listening to it out in the office there. This is a flavour of what she said about Iran.
I have a direct quote from the President of the United States on NATO, and I will share it with all of you. They were tested and they failed. And I would add, it's quite sad that NATO turned their backs on the American people over the course of the last 6 weeks, when it's the American people who have been funding their defense. As you know, President Trump will be meeting with Secretary Rutte in a couple of hours here at the White House, and I know he looks forward to having a very frank and candid conversation with him.
Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, as Caroline Levitt was saying there, will be at the White House. In fact, he's there at the moment. There'll be a press conference between him and Trump very, very soon, in about half an hour's time. We'll bring you some of that. We'll dip into it. We'll see how interesting that is, of course. Now, this is something that's definitely going to be interesting because Edmund Fitton-Brown is with us, the former ambassador to Yemen from the UK. Edmund, great to have you back on the programme. I'm so glad you're here, particularly this evening. Let's start with Netanyahu and what he was saying on the Israeli element. We've heard a lot today about Iran. I do want to ask you about that specifically, what they're likely to do, what the Americans are likely to do. But I think so many people are forgetting about Israel here. They're forgetting about Hezbollah and really what is happening there, and how on the same page you think, I'm fascinated to know, Netanyahu and Trump actually are with this.
Well, thanks, Peter, and it's great to be with you as always. It is a complicated dynamic between Israel, the US, you've got Iran on the other side, and as you say, Hezbollah is also part of this picture. From Israel's point of view, they have a direct existential threat from both Hezbollah and Iran. The US doesn't quite face that, but I think the US correctly recognized that the Iranians were building up towards an existential threat with longer and longer range missiles and with their nuclear program. So, as far as I can tell from what Netanyahu is saying, he is speaking very regularly with Trump. He certainly suggests that the relationship between them is in good order. But in the end, you can't bridge the fact that these are two separate countries with separate objectives. Yeah. And I think the Americans have gone for the ceasefire for their own reasons. I do think that the tweet that Trump did just before the ceasefire, which had everybody very concerned, rightly concerned, I think that probably did cause a problem for Trump internally. You saw that there was quite a reaction to that.
It certainly spooked people. I wonder if it spooked the Iranians or even spooked the Israelis as well.
I think it probably spooked pretty much everybody, yeah, because it was a unique moment of its kind for a US president directly to threaten to commit genocide. I mean, that's what it was in black and white. So I think that did sort of, as it were, shift the mood and perhaps created the backdrop for America to move back from the precipice and to go for this 2-week ceasefire. Now, I don't think the Israelis have a problem with that, but you heard what Netanyahu was saying. He was saying that this can be addressed through negotiation or it can be addressed through the resumption of the war. And I think that applies equally to the US objectives.
It's interesting he mentioned that language, finger on the trigger, for example, or the nuclear aspect of this had to be clarified over the last few days. J.D. Vance now, who doesn't seem to be the most enthusiastic warmonger when it comes to Iran, on his way to Islamabad. What's the task ahead of him? 2 weeks is not a long time to sort out a decades, centuries-old conflict, really.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the best way to look at this is to think about where the US and Iran were on the 28th of February before this conflict started. There were negotiations going on, including the ones that took place in Geneva in February. And the Americans were trying to move the Iranians towards their position. And the American demands of the Iranians have not really changed. The Iranians, as you know, have put forward their own 10-point proposals, which are a quite fantastic wish list, I have to say. I mean, they don't look like any kind of sensible basis for a conversation. But I think what we can do is narrow it down to 5 files. And those 5 files are the Strait of Hormuz, the nuclear program, the missile program, the proxy militias, and the human rights of the Iranian people, you know, going back to the Trump's threat to get involved in January during the demonstrations. Now, if you imagine the Iranians sending their best people, which is probably Galabaf and Aragchi, and the US is obviously taking this seriously because if they're sending Vance, that's a very high-level delegation from the US as well. If they get together, and I hope they will meet each other, because in the past, sometimes they've had nonsense with mediators carrying messages from one room to another. And, you know, if they're going to be serious about this, they really do have to sit down together. They're going to end up talking about those 5 files, leave aside the 15 points from the US, leave aside the 10 points from the Iranians. But those 5 files, there are 2 which I think from the US point of view are non-negotiable. One of them is the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz with no tariffs, no charges. The Omanis have already made it clear that that is completely unacceptable, and we should all be making that clear. This is an international waterway over which the Iranians have got no rights of ownership or control. So that will be point one on which the Iranians will have to concede. The second point they're going to have to at least make concessions on is the nuclear file, because Trump has made it clear that that has been his absolute animating motivation throughout this conflict. Now, the other three, I could see those being either partially addressed or being left aside.
Yeah.
So take the missile program. The Americans are going to feel pretty strongly about this, and obviously the Israelis do too. But I would not rule out that the Americans might make lesser requirements of the Iranians in that area than they will in the other two areas that I've mentioned.
They, of course, are under less threat from it. I'm just talking about those other two areas as well. The reason I basically supported this in the first place, I'm not sure I do anymore, I'm really not sure what I think, actually, it changes on a daily basis, was because there was going to be the stated aim anyway, and still one of the stated aims of Israel, not the stated aim anymore of President Trump, is regime change, human rights for those Israeli people who have been treated absolutely appallingly, dreadfully by their regime. So many people who are just protesting for rights, for free speech. The kind of people actually who, the kind of protesters, people protesting here in this country in favour of the Iranian regime who would kill them for actually having the right of protest. All of that seems to have been swept aside, Edmund, and that makes me very, very sad.
It really makes me sad as well, Peter, and I completely share your views on this. Let's just quickly mention, to dismiss the fourth file, which is the very important file, mind you, but it is possible that that's another one on which the Americans be making maximum demands. I fear that the one that you've just mentioned is the one which the Americans are most inclined just to walk away from, and that would be tragedy. First of all, because of Trump's promise in January, which may well have led to increased numbers of people coming out on the streets and getting killed, and then also because it's really, I think for all of us, the bottom line here is that the Islamic Republic of Iran is unreformable, and from the point of view of the Iranian people, it's also unreformable. It's not a competent government. It's a brutal government, and they were looking for help with overthrowing it. Now, what I find really puzzling here is that both the Israelis and the Americans did express this at various times during the war as being one of their objectives. Admiral Cooper said that at some point there would be a moment where the US would say to the people of Iran, "You're safe now, you can take over the streets." That moment has not come, or maybe never will come. And Netanyahu, you may remember, I think we discussed it on your show before, he actually said at the time of Nowruz, the celebration, he said to the Iranian people, "Come out, you can celebrate, you can reclaim the streets." That didn't really happen. If we really are in a situation where that moment never comes, where the enabling has been done, the suppression of the organs of repression, so that the Iranian people can have another chance at taking control of their own destiny, I agree with you, that will be a tragedy.
I just want to talk about a couple of prime ministers, our own prime minister here in the UK in a second, but Pedro Sanchez, who is of course the prime minister of Spain, very anti-Israeli, says just now Netanyahu launches his harshest attack on the Lebanon since the offensive began. He's just put this on Twitter in the last few minutes. His contempt for life and international law is tolerable, blah, blah, blah. It's time to speak clearly. Lebanon must be included in the ceasefire. The international community must condemn this new violation of international law. The EU must suspend its association agreement with Israel, and there must be no impunity for these criminal acts. I mean, he sort of would say that, wouldn't he? But actually, I suppose it brings into focus one major EU leader's view on this, and how much Israel, in his view, is a player, certainly when it comes to these ceasefire negotiations and what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, clearly a lot of people are talking about whether Lebanon is included in the ceasefire, or whether Hezbollah is included in the ceasefire or not. But of course, really, the ceasefire is between the United States and Iran primarily. The Iranians say that Lebanon should be included, but the Americans have said with absolute clarity that it is not included. And therefore, if the Americans say it's not included, then it isn't included.
Yes, indeed, and for the Pedro Sanchez's of this world, Israel's always wrong anyway. Let's have a look at what our own Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has been saying. He's in Saudi Arabia at the moment and appears to many of our viewers and listeners, Edmund, to be trying to take credit for this ceasefire deal. Let's hear what he's been saying in Saudi Arabia.
Well, we've just reached this ceasefire, which is both welcome and I think there'll be a sense of real relief. There certainly is across the region and for the United Kingdom. But there's work to do, and I'm here in Saudi Arabia and neighbouring countries now to carry out that work in support of what we're all seeking, which is that this ceasefire should be not a temporary ceasefire, but a permanent ceasefire. On top of that, we have to acknowledge that this war wasn't our war, but my job is to protect the UK. It's already had an impact on the UK, and it's very important that we get the Strait of Hormuz open. There's a lot of work to do there. We've been convening a number of countries. I now get the opportunity here in Saudi Arabia and countries nearby in the region to have the discussions, to coordinate our actions, and to go forward collectively in pursuit of those two missions.
That is Keir Starmer speaking in Saudi Arabia. Edmund, what do you make of that? It does seem to be, there's a lot of we get the opportunity, now I get the opportunity, our ceasefire, we have signed a ceasefire. Is this perhaps trying to get some of the glory when really it had very little to do with it?
Well, there's an element of that, I think, Peter. I mean, he's not the most inspiring communicator, and I don't think he's the most dynamic leader either. But he's not a terrible person, and his judgment is not awful. And I think that when he convened the meeting about the Strait of Hormuz, whilst the conflict was still continuing, I think that was actually the right thing to do, because what he was saying essentially was, you know, we're not going to be drawn into an offensive war. However, what the Iranians have done in the Strait of Hormuz is illegal, and it cannot be allowed to stand, and it needs to be opposed by all means short of military action. And I think that was actually a helpful convening of international moral force, which in a way supports Israel and the United States, who are trying to open it by military force.
Edmund, always worth listening to your common sense. Thank you very, very much indeed. We'll hopefully speak again soon. Edmund Fitton-Brown there, former ambassador to Yemen from the UK. Lots to discuss on all of this. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, get in touch. 0344 499 1000. We're asking the question, does Starmer have any influence on peace in the Middle East? I think Edmund Fitton-Brown arguing there that he does have some. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss. We'll also dip into what is happening in the White House in a few minutes' time as well. Trump and Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, who are talking together in the Oval Office very, very soon. Interestingly, Caroline Leavitt, who is the press secretary, slamming NATO, saying they turned their backs on America. Could be quite a spicy encounter in the Oval Office. We'll see what happens there. But we'll hear from you in just a second. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. devices. Subscribe to the Royal Tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Elisa in Chelmsford, who sent me a very good message, very thoughtful, typically thoughtful message from her, who says, Peter, I totally understand that your main reason for supporting the war was regime change. However, there were two other crucial reasons for supporting it: the prevention and development of nuclear weapons and the prevention of production of long-range missiles. Hopefully, now you know what you think. Well, Elisa, certainly those are the three stated aims: the nuclear aspect, the ballistic missile aspect, and the humanitarian aspect that Israel believed in, and I still believe in those three things, absolutely. And overall, I think I probably do support the war. How it has been executed, I'm not sure has been right. The things that have been said by Trump at various stages haven't been well done, although there is now hope, and I really, really hope that we will get to a conclusion here. But I worry that the main thing that I worry about, obviously nuclear, really, really important, ballistic missiles, really important. You know, the preservation of the state of Israel is something I absolutely agree with, both its establishment and preservation. We have to fight to keep that there. The problem for so many people is that, and I think Trump has just stopped talking about the humanitarian aspect here, the horrendous things that happened to people in Iran. And as Edmund Fitton-Brown said there a few minutes ago, that he was worried that you know, will just be one of those things that just gets sort of tossed aside in these negotiations. That really, really worries me. And I know there are lots of people who say that they care about human rights in this country, often people who are on these pro-Palestinian marches saying human rights are really, really important. Well, what about those people's human rights? What about the human rights of the 30,000 people who were murdered, the people who, women who are raped, who are then put to death because they are called adulterers? I mean, the gay people, it just goes on and on and on with Iran. There is no freedom there. And that really, really worries me, as well as the other big issues too. So you're absolutely right to raise those, Elisa. And I just wanted to sort of maybe develop on my thinking there a little bit. Raman is with me now. He has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Raman, you're very welcome to the programme. I think you'd perhaps like to speak up for Keir Starmer, is that right?
That's right, Peter. How are you doing, pal?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for giving me a call. Yeah. Why do you think the Prime Minister's doing a good job here?
Well, the thing is, when Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage were saying that we should have joined the Americans in attacking Iran and supporting them and all the rest of it, Starmer was the only adult in the room. He said we need to be calm, collective, and think about the consequences and the rest of it. Now, everybody's saying, yes, we should have just gone in with the Americans, gung-ho, and all the rest of it. But to me, I mean, I was in the Territorial Army in the 80s, and to me, it's like when he was insulting our heroic, brave armed forces and calling them, oh, they didn't do anything in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean that was absolutely shameful. That was he talked about NATO troops and said they stayed away from the front lines, and that included the UK. And I mean that was shameful. That is, I mean, yeah. I will stand up for Trump probably a bit more than quite a number of broadcasters, yeah. But that in itself was unforgivable.
But he's done a lot of things. Not just, all right, he's had the odd mistake here and there. He's just gone in and said, well, I'm seriously considering coming out of NATO and all the rest of it. But the Americans have got to remember all the conflicts in the world were created by them, and then we've well,
not all the conflicts in the world were created by them, Raman. That's not true.
90% of them, and then we get dragged along. Whether we like it or not, we have to go in with them.
Now, but we haven't on this occasion, and you think that's the right idea?
But in the Falklands War, we got no backing, right?
Yeah.
If you go even further back, when the IRA was bombing England for 30-odd years, and they were raising funds in America,
yeah,
and they were buying Semtex from Libya, and it was all coming over here. But the Americans turned a blind eye to that as well.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Those are very, very good historical points. I just wonder, Raman, can I just ask you, just finally, when it comes to Starmer, I mean, he may have a policy that's popular, and a lot of people agree with you, actually, more so than they agree with me. The polls show that you're on the side of the majority of people in this country. Maybe not the majority of viewers and listeners of the station, but the majority of people in this country. And I wonder, Raman, why you think that Starmer's not more popular, because he's doing something, he's having a course of action that's popular.
Well, first of all, he stood up to America, which I think was a good thing, because you can't agree with everything, then there's no democracy. We're going to be the same as the Iranians or the Russians or the Koreans and all the rest of it. And then, I mean, all right, I was in Iran in 1975. My uncle used to work there for the Shah of Iran and all the rest of it. But the thing was, this all goes back to 1953, when the CIA and the British government got together and got rid of the democratically elected leader. And then they got the Shah of Iran, enforced their own man in there, which he was that bad, it made the mullahs and the ayatollahs look like Boy Scouts. And then it went from bad to worse. And
yeah, I think there is some romanticisation.
With all guns blazing, we've come in now with bombs, missiles and everything, trying to sort this mess out that was created by us.
Listen, really, really, really interesting perspective there from Raman, and thank you for it. Really interesting, and I do think there's a lot. I think your point about the Shah is a good one, because there's a lot of romanticisation about what the Shah did or did not do. Raman joining us there from Nelson in Lancashire. Let's go to Greenwich in London. Mark is on the line and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Peter. Thanks for taking my call. I couldn't disagree more with your last contributor. The whole idea of NATO was a collective alliance of countries that would stand together in the face of a threat. Now, if we're going to start picking and choosing who we're going to support, NATO is non-existent. It has no power.
But I mean, the fact is that we do pick and choose who we support, and even within NATO, the idea that we support another NATO country because an attack on one is an attack on all, that bit of NATO, the Article 5, has only actually been ever triggered once, and that was after 9/11.
Exactly, Peter. I know exactly what you mean. I totally agree. But the whole idea, I go back, and I'm sorry, historically, we go back to the First and Second World War, where we had two opposing powers, and the peace in Europe was maintained because Germany, Austro-Hungary knew if they attacked Russia, France and Great Britain would support them, irrespective. If we're going to have alliances, we should stand together, show that strength. So that if anybody dares,
but the point is, we don't have strength, Mark. You know, when you look at our navy, when you look at our army, it's no, the strength isn't there to show, is it?
That is the biggest shame, Peter. That is neglect. It's really successive governments have stripped us to the bare bones, hoping that the rest of the world would buy into this Cold War peace. And I'm sorry they haven't, because others have been more aware that maybe things will be easier to take. Yeah. But we sadly trusted everybody to be, should we say, as trusting, or should I say gullible as us. And I'm afraid Starmer is nothing less than gullible. He's a disgrace, and I for one, I think we should stand together in an alliance. Thank you, Peter.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thanks for a great call. Lots of common sense in there, and lots to think about from what Raman and Mark have said. They're saying different things. What do you think? Where is your view? 0344 499 1000. Mark in Camelford says he's off to the Middle East to embarrass himself and us even further. Another person on messages says Keir Starmer didn't get involved, neither did any other world leader. We could have been dragged into this illegal war if we had Nigel Farage or Kemi as Prime Minister. Stevie says JD Vance said he didn't support going into Iran. I'm not sure he actually said that in those terms, but certainly that is the view that he is said to have anyway. However, Stevie adds, he made that public statement as a ploy, so it will look better on him when the next elections come and he runs for president. Brilliant tactic, says Stevie. Did he say it publicly? Did I miss that? I'm not sure I did. I'm not sure he did say it publicly, but Please correct me if I'm wrong. You know, it's a 3-hour programme. Everything I say isn't going to be absolutely gospel, sadly. I think we should all nominate Starmer to travel on his own to Tehran, a spokesman for the ceasefire coalition, and let him chew the fat with a few of the Iranian mullahs, says this person. Another person says, Trump said Starmer only turns up when the war is over. He's gone to the Middle East now that the bombing has stopped, when he should have gone there when he was needed to broker a ceasefire, says Ernie. Phil says, I seem to remember Margaret Thatcher managed on 4 hours sleep a night. She did okay, says Phil. Yeah, Phil, I know she did, but also I'm not someone who can survive on 4 hours sleep a night. I need like 9, maybe 10 hours sleep a night to function properly, and I do want my politicians to be rested. I don't want them working their fingers to the bone. I do want them to have a perspective and connect with real people. I mean, when I worked, you know, crazy hours when I worked in government, for example, I made not the best decisions when I talked to real people as much as possible outside the Westminster bubble, which is the job, part of the job I love doing. You know, just spoken to someone in London, just spoken to someone in Lancashire, and going to speak to various people in other parts of the country in a minute. And that's what keeps you connected to real people, rather than the Westminster bubble, which is something that I've experienced and don't want to listen to all the time, although it's worth listening to sometimes. I have a spoof version of Wish You Were Here in my mind, says this texter, featuring Keir Starmer introducing the programme with Judith Chalmers from Tehran. Probably watched that, to be honest. Can you thank Keir Starmer, says this texter, for his help in getting the Easter Bunny to deliver 5 Easter eggs for me over the weekend? Best haul ever. Mark and Selby says Trump's next tweet about Starmer will be a humdinger. Can almost say that with a cold yeehaw. Glyn says, breaking, Keir Starmer's jetted off to 2003 to help England lift the Rugby World Cup. Brilliant. These are brutal. You really hate Starmer this evening. Final one from Graham. He says, hello Peter. Hello Graham. Keir Starmer is a very dangerous man. He wants the worst for this great country and not the best. He has to go ASAP. Well, lots to discuss in all of this. We're going to talk about the people shouting Allahu Akbar. Pete says they should all be arrested on his message, and we'll talk about what's happening near Downing Street. We'll also cross the Atlantic to where Trump and Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, will be having a press conference probably in the next 5 minutes or so. We'll take at least a little bit of that, maybe a good bit of it, depending on what Trump says. Stay with us here and talk, and get your call in 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, has just got off Air Force 2 in Budapest. This is what he's saying.
To check themselves a little bit in Lebanon, because they want to make sure that our negotiation is successful. That's not because that is part of the ceasefire. I think that's the Israelis trying to set us up for success, and we'll of course see how that unfolds in the next few days. But look, if Iran wants to let this negotiation fall apart in a conflict where they were getting hammered over Lebanon, which has nothing to do with them and which the United States never once said was part of the ceasefire, that's ultimately their choice. We think that would be dumb, but that's their choice.
Mr. Vice President, Iran is continuing to block the Straits of Hormuz. Do you have an expectation of when that strait is going to be open?
Well, we've already seen an increase in traffic today. Hopefully we'll see an increase in traffic tomorrow. We actually think that we are seeing signs that the straits is starting to reopen. I think you guys have probably seen oil prices have come down, so I think the oil markets, the gas markets are seeing the same thing. But the president's been very, very clear. The deal is a ceasefire, a negotiation. That's what we give. And what they give is the straits are going to be reopened. If we don't see that happening, the president is not going to abide by our terms if the Iranians are not abiding by their terms.
Mr. Vice President, Caroline Levitt said you played a key role in these talks. Could you help us understand some details about that role? And do you think your well-known opposition to foreign wars generally was a factor that made you a key player in this?
Well, I appreciate Carolyn saying that. I mean, you know, my key role was I sat on the phone a lot. I answered a lot of phone calls. I made a lot of phone calls. And again, I'm happy about where we are. I think the president has struck a good deal for the American people, but fundamentally, the Iranians have got to take the next step, or the president has a lot of options to go back to the war.
Do you know if Iranians requested that you join the talks?
I don't know that. I would be surprised if that was true. But, you know, I wanted to be involved because I thought I could make a difference. And obviously, I think the people really on the ground doing the day-to-day negotiating have been Steve and Jared. They've done a great job. But we're going to keep on working this as a team, as we always have. You know, Pete's been very helpful with the various military elements of this. Marco's obviously been extremely involved. We work as a team. We work effectively. And, you know, yeah, I've been on the phone a lot the past couple of days, but we're glad to be where we are.
J.D. Vance there, the Vice President of the United States, saying Iran has the balls in their court, essentially. They've got to take the next step. He says he's happy with where we are. A reporter asked him about his well-known opposition to foreign wars. I don't think he's on the record. I certainly haven't recalled it this evening anyway. And if I'm wrong, tell me, text in, tell me why I'm wrong, show me where he said it. I don't think he's on the record saying this is the wrong course of action in Iran specifically. He's now on the negotiating team, and he says he wants to make a difference. He is still speaking in Budapest, and if he says anything more of consequence, of course, we will tell you what he says. We'll also tell you and bring you, if we can, what President Trump and Mark Rutte are saying in the Oval Office. But I want to talk about what's happening in Downing Street, and has been happening certainly last night. Crowds of pro-Iranian demonstrators gathering outside Downing Street. This was on Tuesday night last night, chanting Allahu Akbar, which means God is great, of course, during what organisers described as an emergency protest against Donald Trump. This is the comedically and ridiculously entitled Islamic Human Rights Commission. They organised the Al-Quds protest, which was in favour of the Iranian regime. A spokesman for the organisation had previously praised Ali Khamenei, describing him as a man of principle whose legacy would be remembered for resisting oppression. So this was last night at Downing Street. We know that there are some Iranian regime flags that were there as well. I do wonder if any of those people are seeking asylum in our country. I would be very, very interested to know that. Let's speak to Rakib Hassan, who's a social policy analyst. Dr. Hassan, great to have you on the programme. This is protest, this is free speech, the kind of protest and the kind of free speech that would get you killed in Iran.
Well, I think that what it really shows is that the portrait of modern Britain becomes more complicated by the day, Peter. And I think that, especially when it comes to sensitive matters of foreign policy, modern Britain does not sing from the same hymn sheet. It's anything but on the same page. And I think that's been well and truly exposed with the Iran conflict, which did evolve into a full-blown regional war. I think that there will be some people who quite rightly concerned by the degree to which there is public support for what you could describe as a particular type of a military theocratic Shiite dictatorship in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I think that what this also shows in a way is that how confident certain elements of the population are actually in terms of expressing that support quite vociferously, if not aggressively.
Well, they know there'll be absolutely zero consequence for doing so. I mean, there should have been many, many arrests at the Al-Quds protest for people supporting prescribed terrorist organisations, saying and doing things that are against the law. But we have, you know, we have pop artists who are shouting death, death, the IDF, and nothing happens. So if you're someone who supports the Iranian regime, why on earth are you going to think that there's any risk whatsoever by doing that publicly, especially when the IRGC isn't prescribed? Labour hasn't prescribed it. Various Conservative administrations didn't prescribe it. They're talking about perhaps doing it now, but they haven't done it so far, Rakib. It's disgraceful.
Well, I think the point here is that in terms of prescription, if you look at the list of organizations and entities which have been prescribed as terrorist organizations, some people would be quite confused. For example, I think in some ways the prescription of Palestine Action, I could see why some people thought it was justifiable. I thought in some ways it was quite rash. But then some people say, if Palestine Action is prescribed, how on earth is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps?
But isn't this the core of the issue, Rakib? So we're in a situation where big controversy over the last few days, Kanye West, right? Prime Minister says, this is dreadful, what an awful thing. This is very, very concerning. Eventually pressure is put on, sponsors pull out, and he gets banned. And the Prime Minister says, look at me, I'm a wonderful person. Right, I wholly 100,000,000% support Kanye West being nowhere near this country. I think his banning is a really good thing. I think that is a very, very positive step. Well done, Keir Starmer. But the point is that we see time and time and time again that he does the easy stuff. He ticks that off and says, look at me, I'm against anti-Semitism, I ban Kanye West, when actually there's so much more to do. That is the tip of the iceberg.
No, absolutely. No, I'd make the point that I think that the UK in the past has been guilty of allowing entry into the UK radical Islamist hate preachers. I also think hateful far-right figures from abroad have also been allowed into the UK as well. So I think the point to make here, Peter, is that there's a great deal of inconsistency in terms of how we manage these kind of issues. I think that the Prime Minister, Kanye West, obviously, a world-famous music artist, I think he just saw an opportunity there to, really, tick the box here.
Yeah.
Let's ban Kanye West from entering the country.
I mean, good for him for ticking that box, but it's the easy thing to do.
It's an easy thing to do, and I think that when it comes, that there's various other anti-Semites who have been allowed entry into the UK. So I think that when you're looking at whether it's the prescription of organisations which have been designated as terrorist entities or individual figures who have been allowed into the UK or banned from entering, I think there's just a great deal of inconsistency in terms of how we manage those kind of issues in the UK.
Rakib, thank you. That is Rakib Hassan there, Dr. Rakib Hassan, social policy analyst. I want to go back to JD Vance, who's still talking on the runway in Budapest. He's just got off Air Force 2. Let's hear a bit more from him.
Lebanon, okay? And again, I actually think that is a reasonable misunderstanding, but neither us nor the Israelis said that was going to be part of the ceasefire. Again, we're working with people to try to get through some of these things, but it's really fundamentally, we're on the right track. We got a lot more to do. We got a lot more that the Iranians are going to have to accept as part of this negotiation, but I think we've got a strong hand and we're going to play it well. Thank you all. Have a safe trip back.
That the talks won't happen?
Oh, he's left now. That is, sorry, I was looking at my phone there. Apologies. That is JD Vance, who's gone back to the plane at Budapest. We just caught the tail end of that. Very interesting to hear from him. He says he wants to be useful. He really denied that he at least didn't enter the conversation a few minutes ago when he was accused of being against the war. He said he was against all foreign wars previously. Lots of people getting in touch. Steve says, does Starmer have influence in the Middle East? He doesn't even have influence in his own party. He gets bullied and pushed around by clowns like Miliband. He is a weak embarrassment, a laughing stock at this point. Robert says, I do a bit of handyman work for a former ambassador. Proud to say not Mandelson. We were chatting and he told me Trump can't pull out of NATO without Congress, but he can't stall funding, even suspend it. Is that true? Well, I think it probably is true. Certainly 2/3 of the Senate is needed if they want to pull out of NATO. We still haven't heard from the president. We will hopefully do that before too long. He is chatting to Mark Russa at the moment. That's the press conference seems to be a bit delayed. Does Starmer have any influence on peace in the Middle East? That's the question we're asking. 0344 499 1000. Another person says, I have a feeling it will be too long in coming before Trump tells the world what he really thinks about Starmer, and it won't be pretty. Well, I think we've had some pretty non-pretty remarks from Trump on Starmer already, but yeah, yeah, there may even be even more unvarnished. Nigel says, from what I've seen and heard today, most demands are coming from Iran. Trump is in a hole and blaming everyone else. Trump has no idea of the ideals of NATO. The only winner is Trump's mate Putin, who's lots more money to use in his war with Ukraine. Nigel James in Doncaster says that. Please say hello from me to Mark Francois, my old platoon commander. So there we are. Well, Mark Francois will be with us in a few minutes' time. I will note down your name, Nigel, and make sure that that is passed on. Perhaps not on air, but I will text Mark after the programme. Alex says, Rahman didn't stop Iran attacking Cyprus. We're asking to use runways. That's not too much. The final one before the break says, the really amazing thing about the Kanye West saga is why anyone wanted to go and listen to him in the first place. He is dreadful. Well, we're going to talk about something completely different in just a minute, although we may get the the Trump press conference with Rutte, so we may have to dip into it. But there's a guy called Rob. He's a personal trainer in West London. He put a single envelope into the communal bins outside his flat, doing what you're supposed to do. Homeless people, drug addicts rummaged through the overflowing bins, scattered rubbish all over the street. Guess what happened to him? He got fined £600. We'll hear his story in just a second. I want to hear your stories if they're similar. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royal tea from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royal tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
As you know, I know absolutely nothing about sport, but the good news is the top team behind the glass do. Sam, who's the tech op, and also Chris, who's producing tonight. We obviously work together a lot on the weekends. Chris is filling in for poor old Dean, the usual producer of the evening programmes, who's not very well. Dean, if you're watching, I hope you feel better soon. Apparently, the John Terry reference was in 2012 in the Champions League final. Chelsea played Bayern Munich, and they lost on penalties apparently. And what happened was John Terry was sitting in the stand wearing a suit, and then as soon as they won the trophy, Chelsea won the Champions League trophy, off he went, got into his kit, and then came on the pitch and said, look at me, well done me, and so on, even though he hadn't played in the match. In fact, hadn't even been a sub because he was suspended at the time. So thank you to the top team behind the glass for explaining that to me. Unfortunately, it was Football References. Sean Custis, who's the head of sport for The Sun, just absolutely shakes his head in absolute despair when I don't know, basic details about things. Although, as I often say to him, how much do you know about the warring spads and the various ministries of the Starmer administration? I mean, that's more my kind of thing. Anyway, let's speak to Rob McGeary now. He is a personal trainer, and Rob had a very interesting experience, a very unfortunate experience, when he put a single envelope into the communal bins outside his flat in Ealing in West London. You're supposed to do that. Rob did the right thing. Then homeless people and drug addicts rummaged through the overflowing bins, scattered rubbish all over the street. Then the council found the envelope with his name and address in the mess and fined you, Rob. How much did they fine you?
They want £600 or we go to court.
£600? I mean, that is absolutely outrageous. So you didn't do anything wrong. In fact, you did the right thing. Just talk us through this.
Exactly that. Just after Christmas, I cleared out all the rubbish, as we do. Just a minor slip-up of leaving one address on one item that went in the trash, because I'm a tired father of twins. We can all make a little mistake.
It's not even a mistake. I mean, it's not the wrong thing to put something in the bin with your address on. I mean, it's probably not the wisest thing, but it's not. You didn't make a mistake.
True, but yeah, without that, obviously, I wouldn't be in this situation. But also, if the council cleared up the area, which I have many photos of it not being cleared up for a good 6-month period, it's a known fly tipping spot. It's on their own website for fly tipping. The communal bins in question were left for well over a month, and I've, luckily enough, documented this before this incident even took place. I placed, as far as I'm aware, either in the bins or on top of the bins, because I'm not the type of person that just leaves a bin in the street. And then, a month later, I find a shiny letter in my letterbox asking for £400 to be paid within 14 days, but it was well past the 14 days. So they want £600 instead. I've gone through their very convoluted appeal process, which attached all the evidence, all the photos over the 6-month period, documented off their own website. It's a fly tipping spot. They've got CCTV footage of that exact area. Told them exactly what happens. It's a known crime hotspot for drug dealing, drug taking. There's a lot of other crime there as well. People ruffle through those bins late at night, sometimes early in the day, in full view of everyone. And their own evidence includes the strew of rubbish going way out into the street, where they've come on whatever day it was in January to clear up, and just decided to let's open up the rubbish bags and see if we can make some money off.
While it may not be visually apparent, I have been to a personal trainer in the past, Rob, and I know that your time is money. It is, you get paid by the hour. It's very important to you to get paid as much as possible. Unlike many hourly workers, you don't work every hour. And you putting this all together, all the time and effort you've put into this, has probably cost you a lot more than the £600 even already. What happens now?
Of course. Well, ideally, what happens now is Ealing recognises their mistake, that I've got a lot more evidence against them than they have evidence of me fly tipping, and decide to not pursue this to court, or just drop the £600 and we call it quits there and everyone walks away happy, or I walk away happy. Because there's no, I refuse to pay it because I haven't committed a crime. I haven't fly tipped. And I can't afford to pay it. I haven't got £600 spare.
Well, so few people actually do. I mean, I totally sympathise with you. An Ealing Council spokesman said, we issue fixed penalty notices either because we witness an offence or our investigations lead us to conclude an individual has committed an offence. Before a fixed penalty notice is issued, we write to the alleged fly tipper asking if they can explain why their waste might have been found fly tipped. Fly tipping is a significant issue for residents, and we're cracking down on this criminal activity. What do you make of that?
I wholeheartedly agree. They wrote to me and they asked my evidence, so I provided the evidence.
So where is it now in the process?
Well, the last thing I got was I asked, they said the case would be paused whilst they review my evidence. Then a couple of weeks later, another letter was sent saying you still haven't paid the £600. I said to them, hang on, I thought the case was on pause. Can you just double check this for me? And the response was, it's no longer on pause. We've reviewed your evidence. We still think you're guilty. Pay the £600 or we then start court proceedings.
How far are you going to take this?
If they want to go to court, I'm more than happy to go to court. I look great in a suit, but I've got more evidence than they've got evidence against me. So it is as simple as that.
I mean, my problem with this, Rob, is that people like you are the backbone of this country, right? You're an entrepreneur, you're working hard, you're providing a service that people need, because there are so many fatties out there, including me, who need services of people like you to be healthier and to be fitter. You're being absolutely hammered on things like national insurance. You're being absolutely hammered on business rates. There are lots of ways the government, and not just the Labour government, other governments as well, Conservative governments previously, have made your life difficult. You're doing the right thing by putting a piece of rubbish in the rubbish, and yet you're being hammered by this nonsense that if a sort of human being with an ounce of common sense was actually involved on the other side of this, could be sorted out in 5 minutes.
Exactly. And it's funny that I pay my council tax for that rubbish to be cleared, and they can happily just not clear it on well over a monthly basis as it was. And it's so funny because I've got photographs of bin lorries turning up late at night, very late at night, waking up my twin babies and not clearing anything, looking at the state of it and then driving off.
I mean, absurd. I paid my council tax in the last few days, actually, and it's not pretty. And you do wonder, actually, what are these? I'm not in the same council area as you, but what are they actually doing? Rob, I wish you well. Will you keep in touch with us and actually just let us know how it all goes? Because I'd love to maybe talk to you again on another occasion. That's Rob McGeary there. Thank you, Rob McGeary, a personal trainer there. Absolutely outrageous. On Starmer, so many comments coming in. We didn't join the war as we have nothing to add to the war. All Starmer had were the air bases, and he couldn't even allow them to use them. Shameful. Starmer has the backbone of a jellyfish. Total lack of gumption. Pathetic, says one texter. Farage and Badenoch wouldn't have taken us into a deep war as we were not invited. Fed up with the lefty lies, says Gary. And one final one on Starmer from Phil, who says Starmer needs to get his own house in order before he goes abroad, sticking his nose in where he's not wanted, whether there's an opportunity to stand on the world stage and to make this little man feel important, says Phil. There are so many people who are being really, 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 really critical of Starmer, who is in Saudi Arabia at the moment. He will be in various other Middle Eastern countries talking about this, and the memes going round are very, very funny, the kind of funny things that on social media and so on. Let me just show you one of them that has been sent to me this evening. This is a sort of Photoshop of Keir Starmer as Jeff Hurst holding the 1966 World Cup. Bobby Moore as Bobby Moore, not Jeff Hurst, Bobby Moore. Next week, Keir Starmer is off to Wembley Stadium to help England win the 1966 World Cup, says Chris Rose. This is the criticism that perhaps, just perhaps, he is taking the credit for things that were not to do with him. So there we are, pretending there. Well, certainly he's been photoshopped as Bobby Moore anyway. Leslie says the gall of Starmer going to thank the troops after he left them unprotected on their bases. He really is something else. Rayner's new union rights as well, Leslie says. In the workplace, it means a closed shop where employees have to join a union, she says. Well, there's lots to talk about. There's lots of people want to get in on the calls as well. Maybe you're one of them. 0344 499 1000. Mark Francois is the Shadow Defence Minister, Conservative MP. He will join us in a second. We're also going to talk to Dominic Dyer, the animal welfare campaigner, soon, because Labour are to back down on foie gras and fur bans to ease the EU trade deal. That is something that Dominic is very annoyed about, as am I. So much to discuss in all of that, especially also when we know that Mark Rutte and Donald Trump are discussing Iran. That's happening in the White House at the moment. Their press conference seems to have been delayed. We may well dip into that at some stage if we're able to, when they talk in the White House. Doesn't seem to have happened so far, but we did hear from JD Vance and his view on all of this. Lots to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Plenty of time for calls, particularly in the 9 o'clock hour each night. So do get your call in. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me as well, 87222.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening. Thank you so much. Hopefully you've been with me for the last 2 hours, but if you haven't, you're very welcome to the Evening Exchange. We're here right through until 10 o'clock. Lots to discuss, including with the Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois in just a second, what's happening with Iran. We may well hear from Trump and Mark Rutte, who is the NATO Secretary General, in the next hour as well. They're in the White House at the moment, 5 hours behind, of course, and may well be holding a press conference. We're also going to talk to Dominic Dyer, the animal rights campaigner, about the fact that Labour have capitulated on a fur ban and foie gras, two horrible things to do with how animals are treated. This is to ease the EU trade deal. Lots of people want to get their calls in on NATO, on Starmer, on Iran, on the revolution, on humans and animals. Whatever you want to talk about it, however you want to talk about it, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute please, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss in the next hour. Stay with us here on Talk. Let me just read you out a couple of very quick messages. Alex in Cardiff says foie gras is extremely awful how the animals are treated. I don't think people should buy it. One tweeter says, my next door neighbour's cat has more influence on peace in the Middle East than Starmer, and it's a house cat. He never goes anywhere, unlike Never Hear Care. Another person says, regarding Iran and NATO support, remember the US is a huge part of NATO, and the process is they hold a committee meeting based on one nation's request for Article 5. Did Trump request a meeting and propose a NATO involvement? I don't recall he did. Another person says, I'm shocked, Peter, that you didn't know about John Terry and his full kit. So I'm afraid I just know so little about sport. One thing I do know a little bit about is what's going on in the Middle East, and we were going to talk about that now with Mark Francois. But before we do, let's just get a sense of the day about what people have been saying. First of all, the White House Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt.
I have a direct quote from the President of the United States on NATO, and I will share it with all of you. They were tested and they failed. And I would add, it's quite sad that NATO turned their backs on the American people over the course of the last 6 weeks, when it's the American people who have been funding their defense. As you know, President Trump will be meeting with Secretary Rutte in a couple of hours here at the White House, and I know he looks forward to having a very frank and candid conversation with him.
Caroline Leavitt there, the press secretary to President Trump, who's currently meeting Mark Rutte of NATO. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that meeting. They will be giving a press conference at some stage soon. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, has been talking to.
Iran begged for this ceasefire, and we all know it. As the President truth this morning, a big day for world peace. Iran wants it to happen. They've had enough. Operation Epic Fury was a historic and overwhelming victory on the battlefield. A capital V military victory. Now we have a chance at real peace and a real deal. The War Department, for now, has done its part.
Starmer has been talking as well. I'm going to ask a lot of different questions to Mark Francois, the Shadow Defence Minister, in just a second. But just before I do, and I know Mark's listening to this as well, just listen to how many times he says, we have got the ceasefire. I am involved. I will help. He's in Saudi Arabia, Starmer is, at the moment. This is what he said.
Well, we've just reached this ceasefire, which is both welcome and I think there'll be a sense of real relief. There certainly is across the region and for the United Kingdom. But there's work to do, and I'm here in Saudi Arabia and neighbouring countries now to carry out that work in support of what we're all seeking, which is that this ceasefire should be not a temporary ceasefire, but a permanent ceasefire. On top of that, we have to acknowledge that this war wasn't our war, but my job is to protect the UK. It's already had an impact on the UK, and it's very important that we get the Strait of Hormuz open. There's a lot of work to do there. We've been convening a number of countries. I now get the opportunity here in Saudi Arabia and countries nearby in the region to have the discussions, to coordinate our actions, and to go forward collectively in pursuit of those two missions.
I'm sitting here with my pen, and I think I counted 7 references to we, my, I my involvement? Mark Francois is the Shadow Defence Minister. Mark, has the Prime Minister any right to talk about his personal role in this?
Well, I think the Prime Minister is struggling to remain relevant. And unfortunately, because he denied the Americans the initial use of those runways, including the very controversial one at Diego Garcia, that created bad blood between him and Washington right from the outset. And I think he's now desperately trying to play some sort of catch-up and to look relevant in American eyes. But I'm not sure that that is convincing. You've got to remember the Americans are furious that we sent them Peter Mandelson. Now they know what they know about Mandelson. They're very, very annoyed that he is the person we Labour sent in to fulfil what is arguably our most important diplomatic post anywhere on the globe. So bluntly, and I take no pleasure in saying this as a patriotic Brit, in Washington at the moment, our name is mud. And the Americans aren't daft, and they know that Starmer throughout this whole crisis has been influenced more by the result of the Gorton and Denton by-election than by any strategic considerations, and the Americans can see that.
Aside from the runways, which you have mentioned there, and you clearly think we should have allowed, as a country, should have allowed America to use them from the start, what would the Conservatives do differently? How would Kemi Badenoch lead this differently?
Well, we backed the action from the start. We said it was right. We said it was correct to try and make sure that Iran could never develop a nuclear weapon. You've heard me say before, Peter, but I'll repeat it if I may. Iran was indirectly, some would argue directly, responsible for the deaths of hundreds of British soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, for the wounding, the maiming of thousands by giving technical advice on roadside bombs and such like to our enemies. We know that Iran was behind the Hamas attack on the October the 7th. So Kemi was firm from the start that it was right to back this American action, whereas we now know that the Defence Secretary was in favour, but a number of people in Starmer's cabinet, including Ed Miliband and Yvette Cooper, were not. And the Prime Minister was basically overruled by his own cabinet, denied permission to use the runways, and is now a laughingstock in Washington. So we would have had a different approach to this.
I wonder what you think of the ceasefire more generally, because the US-Iran ceasefire, CNN is reporting, the American news network, says it doesn't appear to be a formal written agreement. Should it be?
Well, I think we all hope that the ceasefire will hold, and we all hope that it can become permanent. And it does seem that the Americans have probably put the Iranian nuclear weapons program back years, so that is to be welcomed. In terms of actually, though, getting tankers through the Straits, there are some practical problems. So many of the tanker captains will be understandably reluctant to sail through the Straits of Hormuz unless they can be assured that it's been demined. We know that the Iranians sowed a number of mines in the Straits. No one's quite sure how many or exactly where they are. Unless the Iranians agree to remove all those mines, someone's going to have to go in there and clear them. Now, we have a Royal Fleet Auxiliary ship, Lion Bay, which is heading for Theater with some remote mine clearance equipment, which theoretically could help in that task. Other nations might cooperate too. But even though a ceasefire has been agreed, because of that threat from mines, it doesn't automatically follow that the tankers will all just start going through the Straits again. And also Iran is now threatening some kind of toll, which, as I understand it, would be completely illegal under Sir Keir Starmer's much vaunted international law. It would be effectively like trying to levy a toll for tankers sailing through the English Channel, which in some parts is a bit of an equivalent width to the Straits of Hormuz. So there are a number of practical issues that still have to be worked out before, as it were, the oil starts flowing again.
And in terms of sorting those practical issues, we know that JD Vance is in Budapest at the moment, but he's on his way to Islamabad, the Vice President of America, to try to sort this out. Do you think Starmer has any role here? He's in Saudi Arabia at the moment. Can he help?
Well, as I say, we do have a mine hunting capability. I mean, you know, Peter, my father was a minesweeper man, so you know I'm sort of emotionally invested in this, as the Americans might say. We do have a capability that we could offer.
Yes,
and there are other.
And you clearly believe we should offer that. Would that not have us drawn into the conflict? Let's say, God forbid, this ceasefire goes wrong and we're into a war-like situation or a war again in a couple of weeks. If we offer to minesweep, would that not put us and our servicemen at risk?
Well, of course, by the nature of the task, if you're trying to clear mines, it's a risky business.
Yes, sorry, I don't just mean the mine clearing. I mean more generally as well.
Well, it's a different scenario if you're trying to do that, as it were, under fire. If you're trying to clear mines while you're being attacked by drones or by, guided missiles, that's one different scenario from if you're trying to clear mines when you're not being shot at.
Yeah.
So it would depend on the exact scenario you're talking about. But the point I'm making is, just because let's see what the tankers do, what's the insurance situation with regard to that, what attitude would Lloyd's of London take, for instance. But the point I'm making is I don't think it's axiomatic that just because they've declared a ceasefire, suddenly all these tankers are going to sail through the Straits and pick up oil and bring it back to the West. They're probably going to want some assurance that those waters are clear of mines. And unless the Iranians are going to do that themselves, and then we'd have to believe that they've done it, someone's going to have to go and do that.
Yeah. Mark, always worth having a chat with you. Thank you very much, Mark Francois, there, the Shadow Defence Minister. Lots to discuss in all of this. Louise in Kent has some views. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Louise, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. We've spoken before.
I remember, yes. Great to talk to you again.
Yes. What I'd like to actually say, quite interesting, was, with NATO, Trump, I think, needs a history lesson, because as far as I understand it, NATO is primarily a defensive organisation, and I seem to remember that when he went into Iran, he said he didn't want to help for anybody else.
Yeah.
He could do it himself, and basically, I read a brilliant article here. They said NATO is actually the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation. Iran is right out of that area.
Yes.
And we did go to their help into 9/11 because they were actually attacked in a very, very big way.
I totally get what you're saying. Now, there would be many who would say that, the UK is at risk from Iran, and there was imminent, there was intelligence to say that they were thinking of attacking us, or indeed other NATO allies as well. That's something we'll never really know the full truth of, but I'm not...
And I completely get that,
Yeah, I'm not contradicting you, Louise. I'm just saying that others might say that when they hear what you say.
I completely get that. But I tell you what worries me far more, Peter, and that is our government is refusing at the moment to get on with their defence money.
Yeah.
All of it.
£28 billion black hole, Louise.
And their response frightens me far, far more than anything else going, because I don't feel safe with this government at all.
I think a lot of people are in the same place, Louise. What do you think should happen now? Now there's a ceasefire, Starmer's there in Saudi Arabia. Can he help? Should he help? Or should he keep his nose out?
No, actually, I think one of the biggest things for me now is we exist in a world of the just-in-time. We've got these really pinch points across the world with all this. We have to somehow find other routes away so that if there's a problem with one, we don't have this problem. But also, the more I read about the North Sea and everything else, we read a brilliant article tonight saying, well, yeah, the North Sea is a depleted basin. But part of the problem is because we've stopped all reconnaissance looking for new fields. Norway found a new field. We don't know if it's depleted or not. And at least if we were drilling it, it may not reduce our bills, but at least it would add into the mix. We could get the taxes and everything else.
Yes.
And people could think, oh, well, it wouldn't help our bills because...
Well, no, you're right, though, it would, because...
international gas price.
Well, if there's more supply internationally, that is going to drive the international price down. Ed Miliband doesn't seem to understand that basic point.
What I cannot understand, I need someone to explain to me, they all say our gas prices are very high because of the international gas price. So why aren't others high as well, like ours?
Yeah, it's a very, very... Well, because
subsidies and everything else.
Because the companies want to make more money and are allowed to. Louise, very, very interesting to hear from you on a number of topics there. Thank you, Louise in Kent there. Thanks also to Debbie, who says, I'm an EastEnders fan, and at the end of tonight's episode, ooh, boo, you're watching EastEnders, not this programme, boo. At the end of the episode tonight, a voiceover says, what you've just watched is funded by you, so thank you. I thought that was a bizarre thing I thought I'd share. Have you ever heard that on a BBC programme before where they talk about the licence fee? Clearly they are ramping things up and they want to encourage as many people as possible to pay their licence fee. We know about those millions of enforcement letters. Have you heard that on a BBC programme? I must say I've never heard it from the continuity announcers, who are usually very, very good at what they do and keeping us updated about what the different programmes are going to do. Are they now being forced to say that's paid for by you? Very, very interesting from Debbie, and thank you for that message. We'll get to more of your calls in just a minute. We're also going to talk to Dominic Dyer about this dire situation in regard to foie gras and fur, and the government saying it cares about animals but actually backtracking on that. So much more to discuss here on Talk between now and 10, so stay with us.
Is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royal tea from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royal tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Mark in Stratford, who says, evening Peter, evening Mark. Labour have banned trail hunting on the grounds of potential animal cruelty. I think they're in the process of banning it. I don't think it's been banned just yet, if I remember correctly. Sorry if that's wrong. Yet they're happy to U-turn on the horrible production of foie gras and the fur import ban. This is a perfect example of the weak, indecisive leadership of Starmer. No wonder he is universally loathed. What a mess we are in, says Mark. Mark, I'll get clarity for you on the trail hunting. Actually, I'll write that down now so I don't forget, and I will mention it to Dominic Dyer where we are on trail hunting. He will know. And thank you to Ernie as well, who says Labour have just banned greyhound racing in Wales and want to ban horse racing too, meaning a whole species of dog will probably go extinct, and horses will probably go the same way if they get their way, all under the banner of animal welfare. Well, Ernie, I don't think greyhounds are not going to exist anymore. I don't think horses are not going to exist anymore because of that. Yet Ernie says they'll sell their souls in the fur trade to get back into Europe. It says it all really, doesn't it? Ernie has a point there, certainly, but I don't think we're going to see the end of horses and the end of greyhounds necessarily, but certainly there would be far fewer of them around. Elma is in Wiltshire and has some thoughts on this. We're going to talk, as I should say, to Dominic Dyer in a few minutes' time about this, the animal welfare campaigner, but Elma's been in touch and has some views on it now. You're very welcome to the programme, Elma. What would you like to say?
Oh, thank you for taking my call, Peter. I wanted to make some comment on the bill that this government has not passed on the duck pate, whatever it's called.
Yes, foie gras, yes.
Well, I don't even like giving it its name. I mean, I wonder if they know how they get that.
I mean, it's disgusting. It's absolutely horrible.
If the people, if Britain, we're good people, really. If we knew that ducks, young ducks, are tied to poles in long rows, and that someone comes along and stuffs down with a stick grain, and do that each day until their poor livers can take no more, then this poor young duck is released by death.
Yeah, it's dreadful. It's absolutely horrible.
And it's got this liver. And how people can sit at a table and eat it knowing that that young duck will never see water, never be able to crack. It's kept and it's tormented, and it's cruel, total cruelty. And if people could see these rows of ducks, Europe still allows it.
Yeah.
But I notice it's creeping in here in our markets.
And this was a manifesto commitment, Elma. This was Labour saying it was going to ban foie gras imports.
Yes.
I don't think it happens in the UK anymore, but it certainly happens in continental Europe. It has declined to stop fur imports. This is after the EU made these red lines in its discussion on trade deals. Why can't we just stand up and then say no?
The same. These poor little animals run backwards and forwards in small cages. They're not fed very well. They're not given anything very well. All they're wanted for is their skin. And when they go mad, going up and down, because these are intelligent little creatures, known to forage, known to how to get his feed, look after his mate, look after his babies. These poor creatures get no chance of doing that. I've often thought, Peter, that when animals come in contact with humans, beware.
Yeah. Elma, listen, thank you for your thoughts. I really appreciate them this evening. And Elma is someone who clearly feels very, very strongly about animal welfare issues, as do I, and as does Dominic Dyer, we're going to speak to in just a few minutes' time. Before that, I want to speak to Teresa in Leeds, who has some thoughts on Iran. Teresa, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hello, Peter.
Hello there.
I'm 77, nearly 78, and in the 60s, I had friends who married Persian boys, as we knew it as Persia then.
Yeah.
And they were fabulous men, very respectful. They got married, and I often wonder what happened to them, because some of them would have gone back to Iran. Now, I'm so disappointed in Trump. It's all right going in and taking the head off the snake. To me, they should take the whole damn snake, because that regime was shocking. One of the first things Khomeini did when he got into power was burn hundreds of men, women and children in the cinemas. And that was the start of his regime, and it's gone from bad to worse ever since.
It was grim in those days. It's even grimmer now, Teresa. And you're right to worry about what actually happened to them. I agree with you. The whole regime should go. That would be a much bigger operation than what Trump has done. I don't think he had the stomach for it necessarily, and I really worry about the rights, the human rights, how people actually survive in Iran, especially as if this is all over, the regime is going to be harsher on them, I think.
Absolutely. And I worry more for all those people, which are the majority in Iran, that are going to suffer under this damn regime. Forget about the money, forget about Hamas, everything else. Everything always ends up as money. But human life is more important than any dollars. And this regime needs to go. They're an absolute disgrace. And now we've got them inside our country. And it's just outrageous. But I've seen on the other side the lovely people from Iran who are terrified of going back there because they'll be suffering.
And actually, on the other side of that, you're absolutely right, by the way, Teresa, I'm not arguing with you, but there was so much hope actually from Iranians I spoke to in London. I actually spoke at one of the rallies, but I was just speaking to someone outside the US Embassy. I happened to be there one evening at a restaurant nearby, and he was saying what we really want to do is to go back to a free Iran. We're fed up being exiled. We're fed up being, London's great and it's been good to them, as has the UK in general, but he said the thing we want to do is go to our homeland. We want to get back there. We want to build a new Iran. We want to have a free Iran. And I'm not sure they're going to get that, Teresa.
No, and I'm not, and it worries me. I wish to God somebody would intervene and set these people free and let them live the lives they were meant. They were a very multicultural people, and even they were very friendly with Israel. Israel had a lot of Iranians in there, and, you know, it just breaks my heart what's happening. This world and this country has gone to pot.
Do you think Starmer being in Saudi Arabia, being in the Middle East, will help at all?
Absolutely not. He's an absolute nightmare. I wouldn't vote for him if he were the last man alive.
Okay.
That government are disgusting, a lot of them. And Angela Rayner is even worse. I used to work, I started working office, and then I went on to the shop floor for more money. And I've worked in many industries, and believe you me, the conditions are fantastic these days. They always have been. I retired 18 years ago. They have medical things, they have everything. All right, we don't have massive wages, but there again, you had enough to live on, and when the two of you were working, you could manage.
So do you not think the Employment Rights Act is needed then, Teresa, or are you welcome it?
Absolutely don't. It doesn't need it.
Okay.
It's disgusting. She's not working class. She's never worked in a factory or anywhere else. How the hell does she know?
She was a carer. She worked in caring.
Let me tell you, Peter, I worked in caring and I loved it because I love caring for people. But she doesn't see the real world. She's not a typical working class girl, I'll tell you that for nothing.
Okay.
I'm working class through and through, but it doesn't stop me. I'm not envious of people who have got millions.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with being working class. It's the thing to be proud of. Teresa,
absolutely.
Thank you very, very much indeed for that. That's Teresa in Leeds there. Thanks also to Deborah, who says horse racing is horrifically cruel. Same as greyhound racing. They're not treated as beautiful animals. They're treated as a commodity, like a tin of beans. When they can no longer earn money, they're sold off for meat or killed, says Deborah. Lots to discuss. We are going to talk to Dominic Dyer, the animal welfare campaigner, about labour. I've written down about trail hunting as well. I promise you I'll ask him about that, get the latest on all of that. So stay with us here on Talk. And if you do want to get your view in on any issue, it doesn't have to be animal rights, it can be Iran, it can be Starmer, it can be fly tipping, it can be EastEnders, whatever you want to talk about, do let me know. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's speak to Dominic Dyer now, the animal welfare campaigner. Dominic, you're very welcome to the programme. Good evening.
Good to see you. How are you, Peter?
Just before we get into foie gras and fur bans, we had someone asking about 10 minutes ago about trail hunting. What is the latest on that? Is it banned yet or is it not? I couldn't remember.
You've got a government consultation that's now underway. It's
right.
A 3-month consultation on looking at proposals to end trail hunting. And obviously campaigners like me are very much pushing that agenda on the government to ban it, because we think it's a loophole that allows hunts to use hounds to illegally kill both foxes and stags. So it's cruel. It needs to end. The government's consulting on it, and we hope it will actually end once that consultation is finished.
And you've presumably put some information on a submission to that consultation?
There is, yeah, and if you go on the League Against Cruel Sports website, you can find some advice there on how you can respond as an individual, and we'd like to see hundreds of thousands of people respond. Let's make this the biggest consultation response the government has ever had, because we know people care passionately about this issue up and down the country.
How much longer do people have to contribute to that consultation? It says a 3-month consultation.
Yes, about another 10 weeks. So
okay, so it's just started then.
Just started.
Yeah, and then they'll bring forward legislation. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens there. Okay, I hope that clears that up for that viewer, and I really appreciate you giving me that extra information, Dominic. Now let's talk about what's happening here, because the UK government is to break a manifesto commitment to ban foie gras imports and has declined to stop fur imports after the EU made these red lines in this discussion on a trade deal. So is it the case, Dominic, as I think it is, that we can't create, manufacture, abuse ducks in this country to make foie gras? It can't happen in this country, as far as I understand it, and we can't sort of create and skin animals to make fur in this country, but importing it is something that may well continue despite what Labour's saying. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. So obviously the last Labour government, he went all the way back to Tony Blair back in '97, they committed to shutting down, I think there was about 3 fur farms that were still in the UK at the time, and they were closed. So basically we closed the domestic fur trade under that previous Labour government commitment many, many years ago. But obviously fur is still imported into the United Kingdom. It's lowered the amount of fur coming in because most people don't want to wear it, and the fashion houses and various people in the industry are not using it, quite rightly. But there's still some people that want to buy fur, and you can still, import it and sell it. The government did commit to looking at ending the sale of fur, and the last government put out a consultation on this, which they didn't release. Now, this government have only just released it years later, literally a few weeks ago, when they launched the fox hunting consultation as well. But what it does show is that the vast majority of people in this country think that fur is very cruel, and they'd rather see it not sold. But the government is backtracking on this and the sale of foie gras, because, foie gras is horrible. This is where you're force-feeding ducks and geese, to make their liver 10 times what it should be to make this pate. And you force this down their throats, this extra food, using pipes in cages. It's the most disgusting, cruel manufacturing process possible. You can't produce food like that in the UK, but I think the vast majority of people in this country would rather see none of it sold at all. But again, the government are backtracking on that. And this is really because the EU has said these are red lines in terms of any closer trade relationship that Keir Starmer is wanting to have with the European Union. So this is where we're actually seeing the closer relationship with Europe beginning to impact on animal welfare, which is not something we want to see.
It's not just Labour as well. Boris Johnson's Conservatives had a plan to ban fur and foie gras imports using the Brexit freedoms, but shelved them after an outcry from Tory MPs. Now, a spokesman for the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs said, "We are proud to have some of the highest animal welfare standards in the world, which has seen fur farming banned across the UK for 20 years. We welcome the publication of our expert Animal Welfare Committee's report on the responsible sourcing of fur. This delivers a key commitment made in the government's world-leading animal welfare strategy." Responsible sourcing of fur, is that possible? Is that a thing you think exists?
No, the fur trade is horrendous. Firstly, if you look at the farm trade, if you look at mink farms, many of them are being shut down across Europe because of growing concern, not just for the animal welfare, because the situations of the animals in these cages is absolutely horrendous, but also it's particularly dangerous for potential zoonotic disease risk to humans. So people that are working in those environments can pick up viruses that then can spread into the human population. COVID came out of a lot of these fur farms. There were breakouts during, the COVID pandemic we had. But there's potentially much worse that could come from them. So many European states, like Poland, have been shutting down this business quite rightly. It's horrible and it's cruel. On the other side of it, in North America and Russia, Canada, you've got the trapping of wild animals like coyotes and wolves to produce fur. That's even worse to a degree. This is where animals are trapped and left in the wild, for days on end in the most appalling, cruel situation until some hunter can come and find them and then dispatch them. Horrible, but again, there's a significant market in China, North America, and other parts of the world for that wild fur. So yes, there's no good way of producing fur, be it in the wild through trapping or be it through farming. Both are inherently cruel and actually carry risks to humans as well. And as far as I'm concerned, it should end.
There can't be that many people who would wear fur in this country. There cannot be that many people who would buy fur in this country. There can't be that many people who would eat foie gras. Is this really that big a problem, Dominic?
No, but you always get people to say it's my right to be able to do so. You're infringing my human rights by taking away the ability to wear fur if I choose to, or to go to Fortnum and Mason's and get my foie gras if I want it. I don't agree with that, because you have to have lines that you draw. And I think, the vast majority of people today are deeply concerned about the welfare of animals in production systems that, foie gras are terrible, or the fur farms we've just discussed. So, yeah, I think you've got to move with public opinion. I don't think there's a huge risk to any government, be it the last Tory one or this Labour one, by actually banning fur sales and banning the sale of foie gras. In fact, I think they'd be really popular moves, to be quite frank with you. And I think the vast majority of people in this country would be very happy with that. You might have a small minority that don't like it, but, I can live with that, to be honest.
Why do you think they're capitulating to the EU on this? What is their reasoning politically for doing so?
It's probably, just civil servants thinking this just makes things more complicated and difficult. We have these sorts of problems arise all the time. I campaign about the Faroe Islands, trying to stop the killing of whales and dolphins in the Faroes, and we have a significant trade relationship with the Faroes. We import £250 million worth of fish every year from these little islands. The government don't want to upset that trade relationship. Civil servants said there's all sorts of legal problems. You get this all the time, be it in the UK, even though we're outside of the EU, or if you go into the European Union, even more complex. So, excuses, delays, dithering, civil servants, lawyers, and all of it gets involved in this. Ultimately, though, we should be talking about animal welfare, wildlife protection. And that's why organizations I work with, Born Free and other organizations campaign so hard on these things, because I think it really matters. And yeah, I think we've got to keep the pressure up on foie gras, keep the pressure up on fur, keep the pressure up on the Faroe Islands. All these issues are not going to go away.
Dominic, no better man to keep the pressure on. Dominic Dyer there, animal welfare campaigner. Thanks for joining us on the programme this evening. Grace has given me a ring from West London on 0344 499 1000. Grace, what do you make of this controversy? You're very welcome to the programme.
Well, you said we could call about anything, including EastEnders, so I thought I'd ask you your views on current EastEnders storylines.
I haven't seen EastEnders in a very long time, I must say.
Well, I normally watch it on iPlayer,
Good.
But I have seen these announcements at the ends of programmes before. I don't know if it was a continuity announcer or whether it's just a little clip they put at the end of some programmes where they thank people for funding the programme.
Fair enough. Okay.
What they ought to do is remind people that the licence fee is also funding programmes for kids that most viewers might not have considered, because I think that kids programming, which is educational, is one of the most important things that the BBC licence.
And actually, it's very interesting you mention that, because ITV are now stopping doing children's programming. CITV is no more.
Yeah, I remember watching CITV at the moment the Twin Towers came down.
Really? Wow.
That's one of my memories stuck. People say, where were you when you heard?
Yeah, I remember exactly where I was. I was in school. I was 16 at the time, and I remember the person who told me, and I said, "That's not true. That is just, you're just making that up." And he said, "No, it's true." It was one of those genuinely shocking news events. I'm quite sort of battle hardened by my sort of career in journalism, and there are only two stories, I promise you, that have ever genuinely shocked me that I've heard and thought, right, that is the most incredible, crazy thing. One of them was 9/11, and the other one was when Edwina Curry talked about her affair with John Major. I just thought that's completely impossible. Anyway, but apparently it was. Anyway, Grace, you had some thoughts on animal welfare?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm personally, as I said before, irked with this government because they had said in their manifesto that they were going to restore overseas aid, and instead they cut it further, and that's really impacting people in our world who are the very most impoverished and for whom each pound can make far more impact than it can here. Now, with this thing about animal welfare, similarly, it's making the presumption that the public don't care about things if they're not happening on our little island.
Yeah, agreed.
You know, these geese are going to be affected. They're not British geese, but people actually do still care, and I still care about human beings who are elsewhere. And so, especially when we're in a world where we're more and more aware of conflicts
and more connected, and we can actually do something about it.
And we're sending out astronauts, well, America are, and we're looking at what the American astronauts are seeing. They're looking back at this little blue marble, and, you know, all of the world is connected. We shouldn't just care about what's going on our little island. Yeah. We should care about animals who are suffering elsewhere. We should care about human beings who are suffering elsewhere.
And that's why, you know, callers like you and so many other people who contact the programme, whether they're texting or phoning or sending in voice messages or whatever they're doing, do care about things beyond their doorstep and do care about things beyond these shores. Grace, thanks for your call. Really appreciate that. Tad has been in touch as well and says you should see the way dogs are treated in dog food farms in the Far East. I suggest we use our weapons to stop those cruel people once the Iran campaign is over, says Tad. Just a bit of breaking line here. Sir Keir Starmer has met the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Jeddah. He is the leader of Saudi Arabia. The Prime Minister met the Saudi leader as he visited Gulf allies to discuss efforts to cement a fragile ceasefire between the US and Iran and reopen the Straits of Hormuz permanently. That is the latest on what Starmer is up to. A lot of people not happy with him. MG in Staffordshire says, I enjoyed listening to Theresa on the phone 10 minutes ago. She was refreshing, especially when she said about not voting for Starmer. We should have this lady as an MP. She would have sorted out this country. Theresa, you're great, says MG. And Deborah says the only sickos in this country who wear fur are generally fat old tourists, clearly with no class or compassion, says Deborah. Thank you for that. Are you somebody who wears fur, or do we have any viewers and listeners who wear fur? And what sort of reaction do you get if that's the case? Do you think it should be banned? Lots to discuss in the last 15 minutes of the programme. Plenty to discuss, and if you want to discuss it with me, do get your call in. There's time for new callers. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including Heather in South Ayrshire, who's given me a ring about Iran. What are your thoughts, Heather?
My thoughts is by next week when they're all at Islamabad for this summit meeting, discussing what's going to happen next. And at the meantime, Donald Trump is having a private meeting with the leader, one of the officials of NATO.
Yeah, the Secretary General, Mark Rutte, yeah.
He wants to stay in NATO or whether he wants to leave NATO because of what's been happening with Iran. Because the Americans and the president has been complaining about NATO not helping America with Iran issues.
Yeah, and certainly we've seen Caroline Levitt, of course, the press secretary at the White House. In fact, we'll just take another look at Caroline Levitt and what she's been saying on this. The press secretary, Caroline Levitt, talking about the NATO. She said that NATO let us down on this. So let's just see if we can just replay what Caroline Levitt was saying on this. She is obviously the voice of the administration, and this is what she said earlier today.
I have a direct quote from the President of the United States on NATO, and I will share it with all of you. They were tested, and they failed. And I would add, it's quite sad that NATO turned their backs on the American people over the course of the last 6 weeks when it's the American people who have been funding their defense. As you know, President Trump will be meeting with Secretary Rutte in a couple of hours here at the White House, and I know he looks forward to having a very frank and candid conversation with him.
I imagine it will be frank and candid. It's happening right now because Caroline Levitt said that just before we came on air, and we haven't heard from Trump and Rutte. That may well come during Petri Hoskins' programme. She's here between 10 and 1 this evening, and I'm sure if there are any interesting lines out of that, they may well dip into it when they do the press conference in the White House in the Oval Office. Quite a number of tweets coming in as well, thanks to Daisy, who said, incredibly sad by the lack of compassion shown towards birds and animals by those in power. I feel we are going backwards. It's so upsetting, talking about the foie gras controversy. Jane says, force feeding these poor animals with a tube is absolutely disgusting. On the BBC as well, that message that I was told about earlier on by Debbie, who messaged in to say that she was watching EastEnders and was at the very, very end of the programme after it had gone when it had gone to the credits. There was a message that said, thank you for funding this programme. It's funded by you. Carol's got in touch from Liverpool. He said, I've heard the message on the BBC on a few occasions in the past month, and Angie has been in touch as well to say that she's also heard it. Thank you to the other tweeter who says, we and my all mean I in a narcissist's mind. Starmer is a narcissist, a Walter Mitty character. He believes in the shadows and the cave wall of international law. Nice random reference to Homer there. Great show, says that person. And actually, we can just remind ourselves on what Starmer has been saying here. He's in Saudi Arabia at the moment. He's meeting Mohammed bin Salman, who is the leader of Saudi Arabia. And Starmer has been talking about his role, if any, actually, in these the ceasefire and these peace talks.
Well, we've just reached this ceasefire, which is both welcome and I think there'll be a sense of real relief. There certainly is across the region and for the United Kingdom. But there's work to do, and I'm here in Saudi Arabia and neighbouring countries now to carry out that work in support of what we're all seeking, which is that this ceasefire should be not a temporary ceasefire, but a permanent ceasefire. On top of that, we have to acknowledge that this war wasn't our war, but my job is to protect the UK. It's already had an impact on the UK, and it's very important that we get the Strait of Hormuz open. There's a lot of work to do there. We've been convening a number of countries. I now get the opportunity here in Saudi Arabia and countries nearby in the region to have the discussions, to coordinate our actions, and to go forward collectively in pursuit of those two missions.
Keir Starmer speaking in Saudi Arabia, where he has just met the leader of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of War. He has been explaining about the ceasefire too.
Iran begged for this ceasefire, and we all know it. As the President truth this morning, a big day for world peace. Iran wants it to happen they've had enough. Operation Epic Fury was a historic and overwhelming victory on the battlefield. A capital V military victory. Now we have a chance at real peace and a real deal. The War Department, for now, has done its part.
A capital V military victory. There we are. Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, I should say, of Israel, has been talking about this because, really interestingly, Lebanon is, of course, where Israel's firing missiles there. Hezbollah, which is a bit of a rump, it's been almost defeated, but they're firing missiles back. That's not included in this ceasefire, and there's criticism as well, including reported by CNN, the American network, that actually the ceasefire isn't even written down on paper at all. It's an agreement in principle anyway to not bomb each other in regard to Iran for 2 weeks. This is what Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying earlier on this evening.
And I'd like to stress, we still have some goals to accomplish, and we will achieve these goals either through agreement and consensus or through renewal of the war, because we are ready to do so whenever necessary. Our finger is on the trigger. As you all know, a temporary ceasefire came into effect tonight, a 2-week one between Iran and the U.S. in coordination with Israel. No, they did not surprise us at the last moment, and I would like to emphasize this is not the end of the campaign. It is merely a preparation on our way to achieve all of our goals.
Benjamin Netanyahu, obviously being translated by a woman there. That's not how he speaks. Mark is in Lincolnshire and has given me a ring about the Iran war. 0344 499 1000. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi there, Peter. Just before I jump onto the Iran war thing, I've just had a notification come up on my phone, Peter. It's quite sad, that. Apparently the world's most famous clockmaker's passed away. Sources say his time was up.
So, very good, very good. Yes, you do love a rubbish joke.
I do. It's been a few weeks since I dropped one on air.
Indeed. Tell us about your thoughts on the Iran war.
Iran war. I just don't know what to think of it anymore, to be honest with you, Peter. I think I'm not really sure what's actually being won here.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure anything has been won, and maybe that's the point of a ceasefire. Maybe that's the point of a ceasefire.
Because if you've got a bit of a ceasefire and the straits open up again, that wouldn't have been closed.
Although they're not actually open at the moment. They're not open at the moment.
Well, exactly. It's just, as I say, longer term, what's the actual aim here? Because my whole thought on it was that wasn't it supposed to be literally change the regime? I don't see much point in, weakening the regime.
Yeah.
That will just grow back again anyway, because that's what they'll do. It might have stopped it for another 10 years or 15 years, but they'll still end up in the same place where they were, 6 weeks ago. I just don't see what this is all really about, other than just people dying for some reason.
Yeah.
It just seems, like I say, it just seems really odd.
Well, it'll be.
I said to you before, you had last July, or whatever. You got Trump saying, with his miraculous strike into Iran, that they took out the oil enrichment facility, and then he started this war on the pretext that, they're weeks away from a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
Well, both of those things can't be correct.
Well, it's true, and there's some very, very interesting thoughts on that. So thank you, Mark in Lincolnshire there. Just read out a few messages here. Deborah says, I'll never vote reform. Farage will bring back fox hunting. Well, he certainly said that he's not against the ban of... he has said that he wouldn't ban trail hunting, but I'm not sure he would bring back fox hunting necessarily. Brian says, evening, Peter. Hopefully Trump will bring Starmer and this Labour government down. Amy says, the proposed U-turn by the government of banning foie gras and fur is shameful, but I'm not really surprised because of the number of U-turns they have done in the last nearly 2 years. And let's be honest, this government will do anything for the EU. And Elle was talking about Rob, the personal trainer who put a piece of meal in the bin Then there was various people fly tipping, and he was fined £600. He's going to fight that in court, he told us earlier on this evening. Elle says, watch this story on Talk with Peter Cardwell. Putting a hard-working citizen through all the stress and time wasting is outrageous. Really feel for him. I hope Ealing Council sees sense before this goes to court. They did, of course, have their say in a statement they gave us a little bit earlier today. Let's go to Petri Hoskin, who's here on the other side of the news. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. I like to always think that I know what's going on in the world, but I don't. So,
well, the great bit of this job is that you can ask people what is going on.
Literally,
some of them think they know.
They don't. Yeah, we're heading to the Strait of Hormuz to begin with to speak to this a woman who's huge in the shipping industry, just to talk about what is going on there, because Iran now claiming that they've closed the strait again.
Yes.
We've looked at live images. There certainly doesn't seem to be anything going through, and what is going through, really interestingly, is not following the normal path that ships would follow through on the Strait of Hormuz. They're going up via a little island called Lock Island, which they believe is where the Iranians can then identify the ship, either let it through or not, and charge it a toll.
And interesting reporting from the Wall Street Journal has just come to us as well about Trump apparently considering a plan to punish some NATO countries by moving US troops out of them, out of countries that have deemed unhelpful countries into countries who were more supportive of the war. There are 84,000 troops stationed across Europe. Countries that could benefit because they're viewed as supportive include Poland, Romania, Lithuania and Greece. And US and NATO relations appear to be degrading.
He's been meeting with Mark Rutte, the man who called him Daddy.
Weird.
I'm never forgiving him for
Big
that.
Daddy.
Big. So I'm not forgiving him for that. So look, Trump, blah blah. I mean, there's nothing he can do. It has to go through Congress anyway.
Yeah.
So, withdrawing troops takes a very, very long time. I was around when the British military were withdrawing from Germany. It takes a very long time to do it. So I'm just going to. It's just noise. It's just noise. Epstein files. It's just noise. But I think that what is interesting is, and I said this last night, and Israel is on board. This ceasefire cannot hold.
Well, certainly